In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to kick it off, guys. My name is Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. Welcome back. There's a new session beginning in the House of Parliament starting today. There's so many committee meetings. They're actually in the House of Commons now debating. And what we're going to do is kick it off with our intro video. And, well, before we get going, we might as well take our time here and say hello to everyone. Howdy, Captain Kirk. Good to see you. Mr. Pickles, always a pleasure. Owlette, how are you doing? Rita, what's going on? How are you today? Mike Malosh, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you. Hey, Rickety, what is up, my man? Got to put you in the title here. Mike Tremblay as well. Good to see you, man. Always a pleasure. E. Kingston, what's going on? Good to see you. Let's kick it off with this piece.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Squiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF. Here. I know this place is where I am. No other place is better.
The one we call Canadians.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
You know I am Canadian. You know I am. You know I am Canadian. I am Canadian.
All right, guys. So we're going to launch into this session with a big speech that Senator Donald Plett gave a while ago. It's a refresher on the trouble that we're in with the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. So let's take a peek at that one. It's a pretty great. Take a peek. Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. Do you guys know Senator Donald Plett? Well, he's the leader of the official opposition in the Senate, and he was nominated to the Senate by Harper in 2009. He's a 74-year-old man, still pretty sharp, dry delivery, but it would seem because he has to retire next year that he is a man on a mission, and his mission is to make sure that Trudeau is never in power or control again. He doesn't like Trudeau, and this is a deep look into every scandal that has been associated with Trudeau since he was elected in 2015, and it is thorough, guys. And he also just doesn't like Trudeau, you can tell. Let's watch some of this. It's a long piece, but every second of this is interesting. I found it so anyways. If you don't like Trudeau, you will very much enjoy watching this video. And if you happen to think that Trudeau's a good leader, a good prime minister, and doesn't have a corrupt cabinet with the NDP coalition liberal government, check this out, man. It'll make you ask questions and do some more research. Anyhow, let's just have some fun and watch Senator Donald Plett trashed Trudeau for over an hour straight, articulately. It's very organized. It's really entertaining. Let's jump in.
Not many of us were here when Senator George Baker was a member of this august chamber, but Senator Baker would get up and say, "I have just a few words to say on a matter." I have a few words to say today on the speech from the throne, and in particular, Justin Trudeau's legacy, his legacy of scandals. Colleagues, we are now in the 9th year of Justin Trudeau's reign in power. While it will be up to historians to write some years from now what exactly should be remembered about him, I would like to take the opportunity to outline just a few highlights of the Prime Minister's legacy. In his 2015 report on senators' expenses, former Supreme Court Justice Ian Benny wrote the following: "Senators also play a significant role in questioning, criticizing, and holding to account the government in the traditional language of Sir Walter Bagehot. It falls to the Houses of Parliament to inform the nation of defects in administration, and even of teaching the nation, altering it for the better, teaching the nation what it does not know." Colleagues, this is what this speech is about. Teaching the nation, telling the nation what it may or may not know about Justin Trudeau, or rather reminding Canadians what the last 9 years have been all about. I know some of you dream about a Senate that would be above partisanship. Of course, when a Liberal says it means that the Senate should never, when a Liberal says that, it means that the Senate should never criticize the Liberals. Their definition of partisanship is this: attacking Liberals is partisan, but attacking Conservatives is democratic debate. We will not fall into this trap, colleagues. To quote the Prime Minister himself, "If the Senate serves a purpose at all, it is to act as a check on the extraordinary power of the Prime Minister and his office." That, colleagues, is what the Conservative opposition in the Senate has been doing since 2015. And this is what we will continue to do as long as the Liberals manage to hold on to government. The first aspect of Justin Trudeau's legacy that I want to point out about is his record and his government's record on ethics. The motion on the speech from the throne is the ideal venue for this, as I will cover a lot of general policy of the government. Historically, the Liberal Party of Canada has always fostered a culture of nepotism and corruption. But the Trudeau Liberals are a special breed of Liberals. First, they are totally incompetent. So their many, many ethical breaches are a mix of goofiness, incompetence, and moral turpitude. The Trudeau Liberals are also special in their belief that whatever they do, even if it is unethical, is done for a higher cause. They truly believe they are above the law, and that the ethics rules are only for mere mortals, not for them, the great justice warriors. Let me quote Andrew Coyne, who wrote in the Globe and Mail last December. "Liberals have always been prone to being corrupted by power, but the current crop of Liberals are unique for being corrupted by their own virtue. The preening moral vanity that is a signature of the Trudeau Liberals, the gratitude, as in the Pharisees' prayer, that they are not like other men, is not, alas, an act. They truly believe it to the point that they are literally incapable of conceiving of themselves doing wrong. It isn't only that they are surrounded by people like themselves. In other words, they are surrounded by people who think like them and whose first thought at all times is whatever it is they are thinking must be for the good. That was Andrew's point. That makes the Trudeau Liberals so inoculated to ethical breaches that they no longer even recognize him. They have been dragged, kicking and screaming, over a flaming bed of hot coals that they themselves created before they even admit that something might be wrong. Then, when caught, they would like us to forgive and forget because they mumble, "I'm sorry," with a little tear in the corner of their eye. We all know they are not sorry about anything. They are not even good actors. So since 2015, the Trudeau Liberals did what Liberals always do: give jobs and contracts to friends. And of course, one of the most coveted prizes is a judgeship. As soon as he came to power, Dominique LeBlanc wrote to citizenship judges to pressure them to resign so that he could appoint Liberals in their place. The media has reported that high-level judges attended pricey Liberal Party fundraisers before being appointed by Trudeau. In fact, the journalists found that over 75% of Canadian judges appointed are donors to the Liberal Party.
Shocking. Wow.
At least 6 current Superior Court justices may have paid to meet with the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister at Liberal Party fundraisers shortly before being appointed. The Minister of Justice and the Prime Minister's office had to admit that they were using the Liberal list before making appointments to the bench. Now, maybe that is why the government seems unable to appoint enough judges, because the pool of Liberal supporters is getting smaller and smaller. Also, there are all kinds of trouble with the diplomatic appointments of Justin Trudeau. Remember, the Prime Minister decided to fire Stéphane Dion, the worst foreign affairs minister in a long time. Now, that was a good move, but the Liberals managed to bungle his appointment as ambassador, giving him 2 different posts. The appointment to the EU had to be rescinded after the EU protested. Now, speaking of bungled appointments of a disgraced minister, who can forget John McKellen, who was so bad he got fired twice. First as a minister, then as an ambassador in China. He just simply forgot that he was working for Canada in China and not the contrary. There has been quite a number of Trudeau cronies placed in diplomatic posts. Now, this should not be such a problem if these appointments received normal compensation for Canadian diplomats. But at least 9 well-connected Liberals received compensation as diplomats higher, above the regular pay scale, including 3 former ministers. Now, I don't dispute for a second that someone who has been involved in public life can make a great diplomat, and that the Prime Minister does not have to appoint career diplomats as ambassadors or consuls. But what justifies the fact that these political appointees are paid more than a career diplomat? Is the cost of living in Paris or London or New York higher if you are a friend of Justin Trudeau compared to a bureaucrat? I suppose it is if you want to invite Justin Trudeau to spend the night. This is a very good example of what Canadians know as Liberal entitlements. Now, one of those overpaid Liberals is Bob Rae, the ambassador in the United Nations, a former Liberal leader. The man managed to insult a list of people through Twitter, including the British Prime Minister and the Quebec government. Is this what is expected of an ambassador under the Trudeau government? Were these tweets authorized By someone at Global Affairs? We don't know. I filed an order paper question on this, but they remain unanswered after 2 years. Oh yeah, we're supposed to change the rules so that Senator Gold is obligated to answer our questions. Obviously, our well-paid ambassador is anything but a diplomat, and the Trudeau government would like to have us forget about this. Now, speaking of Liberal insiders, I am eager to see if former Minister Caroline Bennett will get extra pay for her post in Copenhagen. Then there is the case of Dominique Barton. The former CEO of McKinsey was dispatched to the Beijing embassy after Justin Trudeau fired John McCallum. At McKinsey, Barton preached the necessity for Canada to get closer to Russia and China. And we can all see the foolishness of that. He is the last political appointment to China. Trudeau now realizing that even though he admires their basic dictatorship, the Chinese do not reciprocate the admiration for little potato. Barton is also believed to be the architect of the Liberal open-door immigration policy and of the Infrastructure Bank, two of the many disastrous policies of this government. The exact role of Mr. Barton in the shady dealings at McKinsey while he was there is still unknown. This is the firm who advised.
Okay, guys, I think that we have some action going on the floor of the House of Commons, and this is live. This old video, you can find that on my channel. Just put Senator Donald Plett into the query, and you'll find this video. It is very interesting, but I want to jump over to the House of Commons because that is what we've been waiting for, isn't it? Let's get this going. Give me a moment, and we'll get this set up.
30 hours.
Here we go.
The actual study. Obvious here, again, Madam Speaker, that there's little care for Canadians' rights. During that time, the Member of Parliament for Calgary Forest Lawn, who is sponsor of Senate Bill S245, as well as the former Conservative immigration critic, recommended the introduction of a private member's bill or a government bill to address the remaining cohort of lost Canadians. Madam Speaker, we have a government bill in front of us to do just that. Bill C-71, an act to amend the Citizenship Act 2024, establishes a revised framework governing citizenship by descent and restores citizenship to lost Canadians and their descendants. This revised regime also addresses issues raised by the recent Ontario Superior Court of Justice ruling by providing a pathway to citizenship for those born or adopted abroad. Similar to what is proposed by S-245, this bill expands access to citizenship by descent, but in a more comprehensive and inclusive way. Like Bill S-245, it will restore citizenship to the last cohort of lost Canadians, but it also proposes that all individuals born outside Canada to a Canadian parent before the coming into force of this legislation will also be citizens by descent, including those previously excluded by the first generation limit. For those born outside our borders, beyond the first generation or after the legislation comes into force, they will be citizens from birth if their Canadian parent can demonstrate their own substantial connection to Canada. That means the parent was in Canada for 3 years, cumulative. It doesn't need to be consecutive before the child was born. Any child born abroad and adopted by a Canadian parent before this bill is coming into force date will have access to the direct grant of citizenship for adoptees. That includes those previously excluded by the first generation limit. You see, Madam Speaker, we're dealing here today with fundamental issues of fairness for people who should be Canadian citizens. When the legislation comes into force, the same substantial connection to Canada test will apply for Canadian adoptive parents who are also born outside of the country to access a grant of citizenship. If the adoptive parent was physically in Canada for 1,095 days or 3 years prior to the adoption, their child can access the adoption grant of citizenship. Finally, as with previous changes to the Citizenship Act that help other lost Canadians, this bill will confer automatic citizenship on some people born outside Canada who may not wish to be citizens.
In many countries, double citizenship is only allowed for some jobs, especially jobs within the government, the military, or in national security. In some countries, having citizenship of another country can lead to legal challenges, professional challenges, and other challenges, especially when it comes to accessing benefits. That's why this bill would allow people to engage in a simplified procedure to renounce their citizenship. Many of those who will automatically be granted citizenship when this bill enters into force and who don't want citizenship will be able to use the simplified procedure to renounce the citizenship. The simplified procedure has a few requirements. One can't be a resident of Canada. One cannot become stateless. Order. Just a moment. The honourable member will be able to restart his sentence, but I do believe that the honourable minister may have his cell phone on his desk, and the cell phone is causing some issues for interpretation. Would it perhaps be possible to put the phone on the chair instead? I don't know if it's your cell phone or maybe the cell phone belonging to someone around you, but it is causing some issues for interpretation. Thank you very much. The honourable member, please begin your sentence again. Apologies for the interruption. Oh, that's fine. And please do let me know if the issue persists, because my phone was rather far from the microphone, but do keep me posted. So as I was saying, I was explaining the simplified process for renouncing citizenship and how it has a few requirements. One can't be a resident of Canada. One cannot become stateless by giving up their Canadian citizenship. And one must request the process through the department.
Substantial connection to Canada test will apply for Canadian adoptive parents who are also born outside the country to access a grant of citizenship. The adoptive parent was physically in Canada for that 1,095-day period, or 3 years. Prior to the adoption, their child can access the adoption of grant of citizenship. Finally, as with previous changes to the Citizenship Act that helped other lost Canadians, this bill will confer automatic citizenship on some people born outside Canada who may not, again, wish to be citizens, and we will remediate that as the case may be.
This bill includes some measures to make it easier for people to regain citizenship and increases eligibility beyond first generation as long as the people can demonstrate that they have a substantial connection to Canada. These legislative amendments respond to the concerns raised in a recent Ontario Superior Court ruling.
Advocate for lost Canadians who has met many members of Parliament in fighting for this noble cause has said that this bill will be the first time in Canadian history that women achieve the same rights as men in the Citizenship Act. It'll be the first time that the Citizenship Act is actually charter compliant. There is urgency in this matter, Madam Speaker. It's crucial that we establish an updated framework as soon as possible. I would hope, given the cross-party support from the new Democratic Party, the Bloc Québécois, and the Green Party to restore citizenship, that we are positioned to move the legislation forward quickly.
I look forward to working with members of both places to move this legislation along without further delay, other than the necessary time to study the bill.
To who we are, uniting us through shared values of democracy, equality, and inclusion. Through this legislation, we're working to provide a more inclusive Citizenship Act and ensure that those who are rightfully Canadian are seen as such under the law. Thank you. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Coming back from the summer recess, I was hoping that the minister wouldn't start by being so partisan on this bill. I want to remind him, because he mentioned it several times about the Harper government. I have the session of Parliament from February 7, 2008, when actually the Liberal Party voted for the first generation limit. And then it proceeded to vote again for it at third reading. So this original ruling, this decision, in legislation to introduce a first-generation loan was supported by the Liberal Party at the time. I missed the part where the minister said today on how many people will be impacted by the legislation in its multiple parts. That is the key criteria here, because I think it is reckless to continue forward legislation where government officials have told us at committee repeatedly they don't know how many people will then be eligible for citizenship by descent. So I asked the minister, how many people will be eligible for citizenship by descent through C-71?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think what the member opposite fails to note, this is a question of Canadians' rights. People that have the right to be Canadian and the right that was denied to them by the Harper government. Now, he wants to talk about numbers, and perhaps that is important from a logistical planning perspective. I don't deny that. But again, please don't continue to deny the rights of Canadians that duly should be Canadian today.
Hear, hear.
On the 2009 amendments, as an indicative matter, as I mentioned in my speech, there are about 20,000 people that were affected and became Canadians. And we routinely, as a matter of people that apply to our department, have about 40 to 45 people per year that do ask us for the restoration of their rights. Now, there will be more to this, and we'll need an organized way to do this. This is why we are responding in an organized fashion to a ruling of the Ontario Superior Court. And I believe if the member opposite is concerned with numbers, he will take heart in the fact that we will have a 3-year naturalization limit for people to be able to prove that substantive connection to Canada.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Welcome back. Welcome back to everyone for this new session. The Bloc supports studying the principle of the bill in committee because we understand that the main objective is to rectify an injustice. I have the same question as my Conservative colleagues. I would like to have more statistics about those who are impacted and how many there are. So the government will not appeal the ruling. It's also been said that those who are affected or who will be affected have a lot of questions about how this will impact them and their families, and that that the government will take the right amount of time to study the process. So here's my question to the minister. How does the minister intend to address the situation? The member did use the pronoun you while directly addressing the government, so I will remind the member to please speak through the chair. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the Bloc Québécois for their support. They are not necessarily the biggest advocates of Canadian citizenship, but they are supporting us in correcting an injustice relating to Canadian citizenship. And as we've said, this is a matter of fundamental rights and of justice. So I thank the Bloc Québécois for their support. We will have to first pass the bill. It will need royal assent. Then we will need to start an internal process, which will be necessary because we need to respond to many questions asked by the Superior Court of Ontario. They have asked us to clearly set out mechanisms and processes by which these individuals can obtain Canadian citizenship in a reasonable time frame. So there will be many questions, many details, and I look forward to discussing this more in committee or even in person.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I thank the Minister for bringing Bill C-71 to the floor. This is something that New Democrats have fought for ever since John McCallum. So it's been more than a decade, at least for me, in this fight. Now, with Bill C-71, the Minister was just touching on the issue around royal assent. Now, in the bill, there's a provision, the commencement provision, that confers a discretion on the governor in council, meaning the cabinet, to determine when to proclaim the act into force and does not set a specific date. So can the minister advise this House and families that are waiting to have their rights restored, how long is it going to take for this bill to become law and in effect? Would it be a proclamation and royal assent?
The Honourable Minister.
I mean, I would certainly expect that to be the case. Again, I want to thank the NDP for their support. This was a modification that we made relatively recently, simply to make sure that the court didn't feel like it was constrained if they had only a certain number of days to feel like it was constrained by our legislative process. We have told the court time and time again we plan to put this into force as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it's a bit more of an open application process where I would have the discretion to grant citizenship. So I would implore Parliament to move quickly if they don't feel that my discretion shouldn't be fettered by Parliament. It absolutely should in this case, and there should be a number of reasons and and concrete bases for people to get their citizenship. And the naturalization test, I think, is a perfect point for that.
Questions and comments? The Honourable for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to begin by thanking members in other parties and the Minister of Immigration in particular for bringing C-71 forward. The Honourable Member for East Vancouver has been tireless, as have many citizen champions, as mentioned by the Minister, Don Chapman. The work to restore the rights to lost Canadians is urgent. So I'd like to, with all due respect to the Minister, repeat the question from the Honourable Member for East Vancouver. When might we see this passed into law? It's obviously urgent that it be done as expeditiously as possible through the House and the Senate.
The Honourable Minister.
I mean, that's probably a question best. Who yelled it? Oh.
Sorry. The Honourable Minister has the floor. I would ask members to please hold off to their thoughts. And the Honourable Minister.
Yelling at you, Madam Speaker. You know you're in tough. You know, as soon as possible. Obviously, I think this question is best answered by the Conservative Party. Yeah. I think a lot of us in this House would like to see it approved at all stages and get into force, so we can actually get these rights recognized by Canadians who are waiting to become and have waited for a hell of a long time to become citizens.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I did shout out to the Minister because I think, you know, there seems to be a will to want to see this legislation advance, so I was yelling out to say we should call the question. But what's clear from the official opposition is that for the Conservative Party of Canada, whether under this leader or under Prime Minister Harper, there's always been two classes of Canadians. And a change that they made left certain Canadians behind. That's one of the reasons I ran for office, is that the Conservatives never wanted people like myself to have their voices heard. So I would ask the Minister, what is it about this legislation and the constitutionality? We know that there's been a couple of rulings, and also to the comments of Don Chapman. I worked for the Honourable Andrew Telegdi when Don Chapman was leading this charge to ensure that their rights and their abilities were also advanced, and it was important that it happened then, but it didn't, and here we are today. So I would like to hear from the Minister, what is the importance of this legislation, and is there a willingness to have the question called so we can see this legislation advance as quickly as possible? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Again, Madam Speaker, this is fundamentally about rights. The court case that generated this it's a pretty short one. I would invite members to take a quick read of it. But one of the telling statements by the judge in the case was to highlight the fact that women in particular were unduly burdened as to where they would have to decide to have their child, failure of which to have them in Canada would result in the person in question losing their citizenship. I mean, these aren't far away examples. My own children were not born in Canada. Their next generation could possibly have been in jeopardy. So it hits home in a lot of ways. It isn't about people that have never been to Canada. Obviously, this is Canadian citizenship. It is not for all. There are tests to becoming Canadian citizenship. We know, at least I know in my department, how important it is to make sure that there are rigorous rules to decide who becomes Canadian citizen or not. But here, it's a question of rights, and the court case in question is about women's rights. And as Don Chapman said, as the court said, this will perhaps be the first time where women, where the Citizenship Act is charter compliant when it comes to women.
That's right. Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm glad to be up on my side as the first member of the official opposition to rise on C-71. And after hearing the Minister speak on this, it tells me that there's a member there who just came here unprepared to actually deal with the substance of the legislation, that he himself tabled in this House. So first of all, just to debunk a bunch of things that were said that are actually incorrect. They're not true. If you look at the record, Madam Speaker, like I said in my question, on February 15th, 2008, and on Thursday, February 7th, 2008, in the original debate on C-37, on the first generation limit, that introduced the rules that existed between 2009 and until the end of 2023, when the Ontario Superior Court ruled that there were 2 charter violations. The Liberal Party of Canada voted for it. They supported a motion to continue forward with the legislation at the next stage. Twice, not once, where you could perhaps say they weren't paying attention, but they did it twice. They accepted the logic of it. And I want to show you, Madam Speaker, that not only did they accept the logic of it, there is a report from a 2005 Immigration Committee that actually recommended doing something like a first-generation limit rule into legislation. 2005 was when Prime Minister Paul Martin was in charge, which means that it was a minority government, and the majority on the committee decided to push forward on that recommendation, which was then adopted in 2007 by Diane Finley, who was the immigration minister at the time. So this ridiculous claim that we on this side are taking away rights or that rights are being taken away is absolutely false. They all support, in fact, even the NDP supported that motion at the time. There are some members sitting here today who were in their seats at the time when they supported that C-37 motion, not once, but twice. So let's start with that. Nobody is losing their citizenship through this legislation. That is not what we're talking about. Conservatives believe that everybody has a right, if they meet the rules, to apply for citizenship. But new rules are being created here for citizenship by descent with a substantive connection clause that the judge said was necessary. We disagree with how the substantive connection test is created and what the rules are for it. That is a substantive reason to oppose this legislation at second reading, something that all the other parties knew about, because as the minister mentioned, we were going through this during the S-245 debate. Now again, I think I've shown that this is not anything new. Other parties supported the first generation limit at the time. They were all on side to push through C-37. And in our belief is that Canadians like myself, who are naturalized Canadians, are treated exactly the same in the Citizenship Act and the law as Canadians who are born here. My children are born here. I'm a naturalized Canadian. We are considered Generation Zero for the purposes of current legislation. In fact, I'm not the only one saying that. That's the judge saying it in Section 9. So he says Gen Zero, the applicants belonging to Gen Zero are Canadian-born citizens who had children abroad or naturalized Canadian citizens who had children abroad after their naturalization and whose children acquired Canadian citizenship automatically by descent. This is really what we're talking about is grandkids. And the critical question that government officials have been incapable of answering, and I think we would want the sound logistical planning, the words that the minister used himself just now. Sound logistical planning would indicate when you're passing legislation, proposing it to the House, that the House, the members, should know how many people will be affected by it, how many people will be included, because this is about the grandkids who are born abroad to parents who are abroad when they get citizenship by descent. That is the critical question here. And they haven't been able to answer that, Madam Speaker. They haven't been able to answer how many people would this apply to. And I would think that all the benefits that we give out to Canadian citizens that this Parliament has voted on, transfer payments that we allow, the ability to travel on a Canadian passport, one of the strongest passports in the world, the ability to be evacuated from certain countries when there are issues and problems overseas, like we saw during the pandemic. You would think that this government would take the summer to do their homework. Yep. And the minister didn't do their homework. Instead, he came here to accuse Conservatives, accuse anybody who disagreed with him, frankly, did not even read the record from 2008 to know that his own party voted for it. They were in support of it. The same rule that the Superior Court in Ontario found, for 2 reasons, is not charter compliant. Well, I believe that that should have resulted in an appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. On a matter as important as the Citizenship Act, I would have liked to have seen the government appeal it. The Minister of Immigration refused to explain to the House why he did not seek that appeal, why he chose not to go forward. Now, one of the reasons, and it's found later in the ruling. I'm going to read from the ruling partially, Madam Speaker, because I think it's important. One of the reasons that the legislation was found to be not charter compliant is a bureaucratic incompetence at the Immigration Department. And that is entirely on the back of the minister. He is responsible for the logistical planning, those are his words, to make sure there is no backlog, that applications have the correct information in them, that officials are held accountable. So I'm going to read from section 263 to 265, different parts here. So the judge noted, on cross-examination, he testified that his source for this information were various unnamed IRCC case managers. However, the information Mr. Millard obtained from these case managers was replete with inaccuracies. With respect to Mrs. Murayama, these include misidentifying the year Mrs. Murayama's father was naturalized as a Canadian citizen, Mrs. Murayama's mother's citizenship, the reason for rejection of Mrs. Murayama's children's application for permanent residency. Now, there are also errors in Mr. Miller's evidence about how Mr. Chandler's child acquired Irish citizenship. Paragraph 264. I note that in addition to these errors, at the outset of the hearing, I was advised that Mr. Burgess had been told that his child, QR, so this is to hide the identity of minors, had been granted permanent residency or citizenship status. However, counsel for Mr. Burgess was unable to confirm exactly what was going on because, in the mail, the Burgess family had received citizenship documents pertaining to someone else entirely, unrelated to the family or the application. In paragraph 265, the judge, again, found in a very small sampling that there was an error rate of 50% in these particular case files. Now, I think many of us in our constituency offices back in our ridings, about 80 to 90% of our work now is immigration case files. I hope members will agree with me that we find replete errors time and time and time again. Because of the errors on the bureaucratic side that this minister at his department that he runs, that he's responsible for, his minister accountability for, the judge found that there were charter violations. That is not a problem with the original idea that the Liberal Party of Canada supported. I'm going to repeat that to them. They supported it not once by accident, but twice. They knew exactly what they were doing at the time. Now, the minister talked about the substantive connection test without referring it to directly, saying that there would be a 3-year naturalization limit. Now, that is an incomplete statement. It's an incomplete answer. That suggestion to use the same rule that we have for permanent residency is the one found in applications for permanent residence to Canada, 3 out of 5. So I don't think that is enough. I've made that case before at the Immigration Committee during the S245 debate. And the reason I don't believe it's enough is because of the way it's going to be calculated. So the way the rule will be applied here is if the parent of the child could demonstrate 1,095 days in Canada, non-consecutive at any time before the birth of the child. If you're having children later in life, you will have more time to prove that 1,095 days to pass on your citizenship by descent. So by descent here. If you ever traveled back to Canada, you could obviously give birth to your children in Canada. As a Canadian by descent, you could do that here, and they have birthright citizenship, just like my children do when they were born in Calgary. All of them, all 4 of them were born in Calgary. The 1,095 days also, when we proposed to make it consecutive so you could prove a substantial connection to Canada. And I thought 3 years, we agreed at committee amongst conservatives, 3 years seemed like a reasonable amount. You went through a K-12 system, you went to school for a few years, and then your parents left Canada for whatever reason, for work opportunities, take a year off, whatever it is, that 3 years consecutive would be a good demonstration of a substantial connection to Canada. That was voted down by the Liberals. In fact, they voted down nearly, I think, all of our amendments. We proposed over 40 of them. And let it not be said that we're not reasonable. We actually voted with the Liberals on 10 of their amendments. That we said, we can see the wisdom of it. There are sections in C-71 we agree with, treating adopted children of Canadians equally to those who are naturalized or born Canadians. We agree. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. The faster revocation rules for citizenship, if you don't want your citizenship and you want to give it up, we agree. It should be a simpler process. The example that the minister gave, again, it's an incomplete example. The best example to give would be for those members of parliament serving in the Australian parliament, they actually cannot be dual citizen. It's directly under our Constitution. So in order to not have certain members who might have Canadian citizenship eligibility by descent, you not want to make them ineligible. I know in my case, I am a dual citizen. I'm a citizen of Canada by naturalization, and I'm a citizen of the Republic of Poland by birth. Now, they would charge me about $565 to give up my citizenship, and I am not giving up 1 red cent. There are still some red cents in circulation. I will not give up 1 red cent to the Republic to have to pay them to give up my citizenship, and the application is entirely in Polish as well. Our rules actually be much simpler for individuals to be able to renounce their citizenship if they did not want it. I find it interesting that the minister didn't even know that about his own legislation. We also support another important part, which was in the original S-245, this Senate bill that came from our colleague on the Conservative side, Senator Yona Martin. So Senator Martin wanted to address 50 months of lost Canadians between 1977 and about 1981. We agreed. That's why the legislation came here. And at the time we said, can't we just pass this quickly enough to look after the Section 8 lost Canadians? Because we agreed that they should have their citizenship restored because they missed the cutoff date. In fact, one of our members from Saskatchewan almost became one of those lost Canadians, and he only found out in a few months' time that he needed to actually apply to maintain his citizenship. So we agreed with the principle that that group of Canadians should have their citizenship restored, protected. Now, the other changes that the government's proposing in here is not what I would call proper planning, proper logistical planning, to use the minister's term. And why should we believe that this minister would be capable of managing the new applications that will result of people seeking the proof of citizenship document? That's why I asked the question, how many people will this be? How much resources are needed to process these? Are they in the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands? Are they more than that? That would be a huge burden on the department. Back in September of 2022, that minister announced that they would have all digital applications, and the claim was made both in public and private in that committee that it would help reduce the backlog of immigration applications. It hasn't done that, Madam Speaker. We're still at over 2 million backlogged applications in the system, and some of the wait times are just as long, if not longer, than they used to be for some of the major PR programs. I'll read you a few of the headlines from different commentators, immigration consultants on this. So the first one is here from Law 360 Canada. Bill C-71 depreciates Canadian citizenship by Sergio R. Caris. First reading, how the Liberals keep dropping the barriers on who can become a Canadian. Jamie Sarkonik. Liberals water down citizenship for grandkids of convenience Canadians. Government bill will allow Canadians to pass citizenship rights to kids born abroad. This is a Canadian Press article. Another one here from Brian Lilly. Trudeau Liberals making moves to cheapen Canadian citizenship. Canada introduces new bill, it says, to restore citizenship by descent. And then if you go into the provisions on this substantial connection test, on which I have, again, a lot of concerns. At committee, we proposed a change to make it consecutive days, 1,095 consecutive days.
Point of order, the honourable member for Torres de Blainville. Is there a hard time with the interpretation?
Is it working now? Is it working now? I'll keep talking.
Oui.
Is the translation working? No?
I'm not sure, Madame Speaker. You were the one speaking in French. I thought there was a problem with the translation. That's why I was speaking in English to see if it was working in French.
Is it working now? Testing. Okay, oui. Oui. C'est bien. Okay, and I just want to remind the honourable member, he was reading titles and he mentioned the Prime Minister's name, so I would just ask him maybe to just say Prime Minister as opposed to the name. The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Forgive me for that error if I read the Prime Minister's name into the record. I don't believe I did. So yeah, forgive me for that, Madam Speaker, and thank you for reproaching me for doing so. Peut-être je vais donner un break.
Perhaps I will give the interpreter a break and continue in French because I see that I have roughly 6 minutes left to speak about the backlog of applications at the Immigration Department. We always forget that it's immigration and citizenship, that there's two things there at the same time. So all of the backlogged applications, well, there's more than 2 million of them. And this minister is insisting he's working on them. He spends a lot of time on Twitter, on X, battling with anonymous people and taking cheap shots at those who don't agree with him, rather than managing his department. And we see this a lot at committees, at the Immigration Committee. There are many people with this backlog of applications. Some people wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes even, for applications that should be easy to complete in the deadlines that are given. And now we're seeing this today. We'll have a look at the refugee situation, the management of this government, and by this minister in particular. Well, what we've seen at the department today, more than 220,000 asylum seekers that are in the backlog, more than 300,000 that are waiting, and now there's a 3.5-year wait before a request can be processed, examined, and for an answer to be applied. So in 2016, it was estimated at roughly 17,000. So we went from 17,000 for asylum seekers to 220,000 backlogged files and more than 100,000 files that are in processing. So thousands of people are waiting, people who came to Canada under another immigration program or went through Roxham Road. They made an asylum request or a refugee request, and we thought that the government would have given enough resources to manage these people who go through the system to make sure that their rights are not violated. And that's what the minister has said here. But now we're seeing year after year, it continues. I even have the figures. In 2022, when the minister became the Minister of Immigration, it was over 60,000 backlog. In 2023, the backlog went to over 150,000, and then in 2024, in July alone, we're over 200,000 backlogged files. And now I made an ATIP request that I received the answer to today that shows that more than 18% of people who make a request for an asylum application, 18% of international students, they're international students, and they are now in this backlog in this department.
When the minister's talking about, he doesn't know the numbers, couldn't respond to the question, this is critical to how immigration and citizenship and the refugee system is managed in Canada. The minister doesn't know the impact of his own legislation, and that greatly worries me that he's not aware of the details. And like I've demonstrated, we Conservatives had a private member's bill that was proposed from the Senate side that offered to fix the Lost Canadians for Section 8 Lost Canadians, those 50 months. We were on side. We proposed substantive amendments once the scope of amendments was expanded to the substantive connection test, and to introduce what I think is the most critical requirement to have a police record check, to actually do a security record check. One amendment, I will say, that the Liberals voted against, with their allies in the NDP, voted against it at committee. And now we've seen over the last 6 to 12 months many security issues with different types of visa applicants who have been approved and come to Canada. I think the security of Canadians is incredibly important. The integrity of our citizenship system is critical. And I don't trust this minister. I don't trust the Liberal Party. I don't trust their allies in the NDP either, that they will be able to manage the new flow of applications, because they just don't know how many people will be eligible through C-71 for citizenship by descent. And as the judge found in his own ruling, the reasons for the Charter non-compliance is not that there was an overall violation for it. It was because of the incompetence of the minister, the bureaucracy that was failing to provide accurate information. Madam Speaker, 50% errors in applications being processed. Dates were wrong, names were wrong, even they received a citizenship document for someone who wasn't even related to the same family. Those are serious errors in administration that the minister should have had fixed. So we will be opposing this piece of legislation. We will then propose amendments, because we're going to seek those amendments at committee to try and fix the legislation. And if we can fix it, then we'll revise our position. Because I think if we can fix it by providing the substantive connection test be 1,095 days consecutive or more days, we can come to some type of agreement on what Canadians expect. And a security record check is an absolute requirement. We have already chaos in the immigration system. The immigration minister and the government that he's part of has destroyed the consensus in Canada that immigration is a great thing. And I think it is a great thing. I'm just sad to see so many Canadians come up to me during door knocking at town halls they don't agree with anymore. So because we can't trust them with something as important as our citizenship, we're going to vote against them.
Great job.
And comments, the honourable member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I found it really fascinating to listen to that member's comments. And what's really interesting is that in Canada, we have an elected House, and so Canadians get to choose who they're voting for. But we also have an independent judicial process. And that independent court ruled the Harper legislation unconstitutional on multiple grounds. And this member, rather than actually respect our independent court processes, is suggesting that this government should have been appealing that decision, rather than give Canadians their rights. This Conservative Party, today no different than under the Prime Minister Stephen Harper, believes that they can pick and choose Canadians' rights. It is wrong then, it is wrong now. I would like to understand from the member, when he challenges the substantive clause, why is it that he believes that second generation born abroad should be having to do the substantive clause, yet people born prior should not? And why does he believe he has the ability to determine who should be a Canadian and who has the right not to be a Canadian, I guess? Thank you.
Member for Calgary Shepherd.
So to the point I think the member was making, nobody will lose their citizenship through C-71. There's no new person who will lose their citizenship. As I've said before, and the member's heckling me now, if she'd allow me a chance to answer it, I'll give a thoughtful answer as best I can, Madam Speaker. Her own party voted for this legislation twice, back when it was C-37, the first generation limit.
Sorry, the honourable member is has had her opportunity to ask a question now. I just want to remind members, if they want to have other conversations, they should take it out so as not to disturb the member who has the floor. A point of order, the honourable member for Waterloo.
Madam Speaker, I know that I do sometimes speak in this House when it's not my turn, but when I do not speak and I'm given that credit, I don't appreciate it. In the case where the member referred to, it was actually not me speaking.
I'm sorry, the honourable member was having a conversation with someone across the way. And I would just ask her to step out and have that conversation if she wishes to speak, because it does disrupt. There is an echo in the House, so we can hear what's going on at the other end. The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So to continue what I was saying, when it was C-37, the first generation limit was introduced, the Liberal Party of Canada voted in favour of those changes twice. So they can't now claim that now it's a charter violation and they've kind of changed their minds. They supported it then for reasons that they had. I don't know what those are exactly, but they did twice, so it wasn't a mistake. And what I believe in this legislation, the key is, what will be the impact on our citizenship system and our immigration system, and how many people would this impact? The minister was incapable of answering, and I think it's a critical question that Canadians need to know.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for Calgary Shepherd. We agree, we get along pretty well, we can work well together. I think he's a person that can put partisanship aside in dealing with legislation on immigration. So I agree with some of the things he said in his speech. He said that it's chaotic right now, the situation, and that's true. The department is probably one of the most dysfunctional in the whole federal government. And when he talks about politicians who should stop being aggressive and to support people who are in need, I agree agree fully with him about that. I think that's a good way of looking at things, so I agree with my colleague once again on that. Now, when it comes to this bill, the only thing I have trouble understanding in the Conservative position, which I respect, by the way, is when it comes to the amendments to improve this bill, if it's sent to committee, if it ever gets sent to committee. So we agree with the principle of the bill, but there is room for improvement. So why doesn't the colleague vote for this bill to be referred to committee, and then it can be improved, and then we can vote for or against, depending on whether or not the amendment's passed? The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from the Bloc. We work on a committee together. Sometimes we're opposed, but it's not personal when you have a difference of opinion, a political difference, and it happens, especially when you're from different parties. So our problem is that the last time we dealt with this issue at the committee was that we proposed dozens of amendments that would have included the fact that the 1,100 and some days be counted consecutively. They would have to be consecutive, and there would have to be a security check to find out whether there were any national security issues for each application the department received. The government party, the Liberals, and the NDP voted against our amendment, and that's why it's very important. That's why we're voting against this, because we're pretty sure the same thing would happen at committee again.
Speaker, the truth of the matter is the Conservatives actually filibustered Bill S-245 for 30 hours. At committee, and even after that it has gone through the committee and be referred back to the House for third reading, they traded down that bill in the order of precedence 8 times so that we will not get to debate that bill in third reading in this House and vote it on. Now, the leaders of the official opposition wrote to family members who were concerned about their rights being taken away and their constitutional rights being violated. And the official opposition leader's office responded to the family members, and I quote, "Conservatives will preserve what it means to be a citizen of this country and fundamentally what it means to be a Canadian. Please be assured we will continue to support and advocate for this legislation to reach its third reading in the House of Commons." That's in reference to Bill S-245. This is blatantly false. If that's the case, why did the member from Calgary Forest Lawn traded the bill in the order of precedence 8 times so that it cannot be in this House for third reading debate?
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always interesting to hear the NDP complain about committee work because they always want to send things to committee. I want to do work at committee, and when it's presented to me, I do it. So we proposed well over 49 amendments, and I'm looking at them here because I have them with me. We've offered 10 times we voted with the Liberals in support of their amendments that we agreed with. So we were willing to do. I'm being heckled again.
Again, I want to remind the members if they have an opportunity to ask a question, if they wish to ask more questions, to please wait till the appropriate time. The Honourable for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No, it's interesting. This is the first day back, and I think I've been heckled more as a member today than I have probably in the entire last session. And I'm not a member that does the heckling. I hope you will agree, Madam Speaker. I try to restrain myself. I'm not always perfect. I have a member next to me who sometimes does the same. So on the committee work, South Shore St. Margaret's, I know. On the amendments, we proposed substantive amendments that would improve the bill. And I told the members on the committee that if we could seek consensus on our amendments, that we would vote in favor of the legislation. But we couldn't find it. Police record checks are important. Making sure a person has a substantive connection to Canada is important. At the very minimum, it should be consecutive and not just spending a few days in a year. There's also the question of how would you prove 1,095 days in the previous 40 years of your life? Say you had kids when you were starting at 40. Now, these are important administrative questions. Even the minister recognized them, but he couldn't answer how many people would be impacted. And I'll just remind the NDP, they voted for C-37 with a first-generation limit back in 2008.
Comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I think it's a very simple question in which many Canadians are concerned about.
Kevin Lamoureux
the leader of the Conservative Party has no issue in terms of raising the
Watch how serious
notwithstanding
he's gonna
clause.
sound.
Now we have a former Conservative government that tried to establish the first-generation limits. And we have a Superior Court in Ontario that says it's unconstitutional. Will the critic for immigration give clear indication to the House that a Conservative party, the official opposition, would never use the notwithstanding clause in order to invoke its will in regards to Canadian citizenship? Will he give us that assurance?
The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
That member well knows, as the parliamentary secretary on the government side that speaks often in the House, that we will only use it on justice bills. It's not a justice bill. This is a Citizenship Act. I just want to remind the member, because again, he basically said it, that there's taking away of rights here. The Liberal Party of Canada on February 7th, 2008, on Bill C-37, voted in favor of second reading and referred it to a committee. And on February 15th, again, the same thing, seeking unanimous consent. Not unanimous consent and a vote on division. No, unanimous consent to simply proceed with the motion on third reading and passed all the report stage and was concurred in. The Liberal Party supported the 2009 first-generation limit at the time, so they can't now back away from it. We just want legislation that is reasonable, not reckless, legislation where the numbers are provided to parliamentarians so that we know what we're voting on and we know what the impact will be on Canadian citizenship and on Canadians in general.
Resuming debate, l'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker. A Bloc member speaking to the Canadian Citizenship Act may seem strange to some people, but as you know, it would be easier for lost Canadians. Once Quebec is an independent country, it'll be easier for those lost Canadians to get their Quebec citizenship back. Madam Speaker,
what is he talking
about? I took the floor a few months ago in this House to talk about Bill S-245, which the purpose of which was to correct historic injustice by granting citizenship to Canadians whose files had fallen through the cracks. We're talking about the children of Canadian parents who were born abroad, who lost their citizenship because of changes in the federal rules or for other things that seemed unjustifiable at the time. So essentially what S-245 was about was restoring citizenship to people who lost their status because of the overly complex and often unfair provisions of previous Canadian laws. Bill C-71, the bill before us today, takes up on this, follows through on this idea. C-71 incorporates all the amendments proposed in S-245, which were designed to correct the injustices and errors of the Citizenship Act. The bill is an answer to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice ruling that the limit on the transmission of citizenship to the first generation of children of Canadians born abroad was an unconstitutional limit. So, obviously, Quebec one day will have its own citizenship legislation, but the government was then given 6 months to amend the law. C-71 was tabled as a safeguard because S-245 was unfortunately roadblock. And why was that, Madam Speaker? Well, because of partisanship on committee and elsewhere. So on that point, Madam Speaker, I'd like to repeat the following. Despite my occasional differences of opinion with my colleagues from other parties who sit here in this House, as you know, I do not typically behave in a partisan fashion. I believe that being transparent often allows me to do my job better on behalf of my constituents and Canadians. My constituents put their trust in me and elected me to work in the House of Commons with whatever parties or whatever colleagues to make progress without looking at what my colleagues' political stripes were, without allowing that to be a problem. So I'm often disappointed by all the partisanship we see here in this place. So today I'm not speaking just for Quebecers. but also for a fair few Canadians whose applications at IRCC have fallen through the cracks. As the Bloc's immigration and citizenship critic, I'm going to talk to you about Canadian citizenship because that affects everyone here. And I'm also the critic for international human rights, so there's a lot of overlap there. So more specifically today, I'm talking about C-71, an act to amend the Citizenship Act. I want to talk to you, Madam Speaker, about these people who are now known as lost Canadians, and they often lost their citizenship for reasons that were misunderstood and ridiculous. According to the department's estimates, there are still between 100 and 200 lost Canadians who still have not recovered their citizenship. So the bill corrects an oversight in the 2009 legislation, which was a missed opportunity to remove the requirement for these people to reapply to recover their citizenship when they turn 28. Madam Speaker, at the risk of spoiling the surprise, but for the sake of consistency, and this is a principle that many of my colleagues from the other parties seem to lack, I am going to state clearly that I was in favor of S-245 and I am in favor of C-71. When you think about it, this bill fits perfectly with our contemporary vision of what citizenship should be. Citizenship, once duly granted, should never be taken away from an individual unless there's an exception. So a person should never be stripped of their citizenship. Only a citizen should be able to freely renounce his or her citizenship of their own volition. Like all parties here in the House, the Bloc defends the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that document stipulates that all are equal before the law. Citizenship is an egalitarian legal status given to all members of the same community. It does grant privileges, but it also creates duties. In this case, Canada, I'm sorry, I think I heard someone singing or playing an Elvis Presley song behind me. I don't know if that has anything to do. Anyway, their voice was pretty good. So, as I was saying, citizenship grants privileges, but it also imposes duties. And in this case, Canada has failed its own citizens. It's crucial to fix this problem because, as I was saying, citizenship has to be equal for everyone. It's just a question of principles. And if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's clear that this is just a question of principle. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that it's still very unfair that in 2022, an individual can lose their citizenship for reasons that they're probably unaware of. Those provisions are outdated. They're from a distant era based on a dubious principle about what it means to be a citizen of Canada. And previous reforms didn't go far enough, and they weren't directive enough, and that's why we've had to get involved. We know that the process of recovering one's citizenship is quite complicated, far too complicated, in fact. The Department of Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship is probably the most dysfunctional department in the federal apparatus. And I think my colleagues agree with me because everyone in their riding offices has to deal with all these complex files, and they're mostly dealing with citizenship. And, Madam Speaker, you would probably agree, even though you have to remain neutral, I'm sure you get tons of these cases in your constituency office, and they're hard to solve. So the department is dysfunctional. They've got all kinds of problems. There are structural issues in that department as well. So it's already complicated enough dealing with that department. But the problem has to be solved as quickly as possible. We need to find a solution, and I think there's a pretty clear consensus around that. And certainly around C-71, and this is certainly what we see at committee.
Now, let's take a look at what's happened previously, so we can see how complicated this file is. There was reform in 2005, another one in 2009, and in 2015. 3 reforms. Now, there is a good deal of citizens who've been forgotten in these reforms. Spouses, children, children of soldiers, members of Indigenous communities. People who were left behind, not supported, because the original legislation has not been properly shored up. So here's my request to my Conservative colleagues. They should arrive in committee with amendments, and we will study their amendments, as the Bloc Québécois always does, and if the amendments are good, we'll vote for them. If not, we'll vote them down. So we wish to carefully study all Conservative amendments. Now, this act to amend the Citizenship Act, and I'll be saying this for all those who are tuning in today, would ensure that citizenship by descent is conferred on all persons who were born outside Canada before the coming into force of this enactment to a parent who was a citizen. This would also confer citizenship by descent on all persons born outside Canada and allow and also in the case of adoption. So for all persons outside Canada who were adopted before the coming into force of the enactment by a parent who was a citizen, and also to support all those who lost their citizenship under former Section 8 of the Act, or because they made an application under that section that was not approved. We came close to royal assent at some point, but parliamentary obstruction and delays brought us to where we are today. So people are waiting, and they're waiting because of petty politics. That's been the case, though, on many files and in many committees here on the Hill over the past year. And I'm not accusing one side more than the other. I've seen obstruction from the official opposition and the government. But unfortunately, behind all this obstruction are people whose needs are unmet, and they've been unmet for electoralist reasons or petty partisan politics reasons. The Bloc Québécois, though, we're here to support people. We're here to support Quebecers who care about the future of Quebec. And we're not only here for Quebecers when it comes time for elections. No, Madam Speaker, we're here for Quebecers at all times. What's good for Quebec, we vote for. What's not good for Quebec, we vote against it. C-71 would support more Quebec citizens. When I see federal parties blocking, delaying, being partisan, as was the case for S-245. When I see that, I put myself in the shoes of those who have been finally waiting for royal assent. For example, in Quebec, there's the case of Jean-François Roy. He was born abroad, although his father did his PhD in the United States, but he came back to Quebec, spent his whole life in Quebec, and was not able to automatically acquire citizenship. That type of situation leads to unnecessary stress for families who are dealing with a lack of thoroughness on the part of the federal government. This federal government is always taking too long to address situations, especially everything that is related to immigration. There's always backlog. Even new programs, before they even start, there seems to be a backlog. This is so unfortunate for people. There are real people, human beings, men, women, and children who are stuck in limbo with IRCC. It should be the most humane, humanitarian department, but unfortunately, it's the least so. There are horror stories every day in immigration, and I'm the Bloc Québécois critic for immigration, so I hear these stories every day. All that to say that the bottom line is that the Bloc Québécois is here for people, first and foremost. That's why we will vote for C-71 in principle. We will study it thoroughly as necessary. We will thoroughly review and consider all amendments tabled. That's what we're here for, and that's what we were elected for. We do have differences of opinion here, and this comes as no surprise to anyone. The Bloc Québécois does want an independent Quebec. We will succeed one day. Everyone who works with us here in Ottawa, they know that we are independentists, that we want independence, and they know that eventually Quebec will become a country. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I do think that we do need to put it in a perspective, as the member made reference to, is that the people that it actually affects. There are many individuals in the different regions of the country that are, in fact, being challenged in their ability to get their citizenship recognized. And whether it's Senate legislation or now government legislation, that it is imperative that we try to see the legislation at least get to the next step. And I'm wondering if the member can provide his thoughts in regards to, by advocating getting it out of second reading and going into committee, will at least be able to advance it. Conservatives say that they have amendments, and it would be welcome to see the type of amendments that they would have. And maybe we can come up with some sort of unanimous support in getting the legislation through. His thoughts on that.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Well, this rarely occurs, Madam Speaker, but right now, I believe that my colleague heard my speech, summarized it into one question, and asked it to me. His question is exactly what I said in my speech, so we agree. The Bloc Québécois supports S-71 in principle, just like we supported C-71, just like we supported S-245. And the Conservatives say that they'll be tabling common sense amendments. Well, if they're so common sense, then we'll support them. I don't think C-71 is a bill on which we should have partisan issues. This is not the type of issue where we should act silly or engage in politicking. This is a simple bill in principle. There is an injustice, and we must address it through legislation. And that is the most essential part of the work of parliamentarians, is it not, Madam Speaker? The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Here's my question. In committee, if this bill makes it to committee, would the Bloc Québécois be ready to support an amendment making it such that it would be mandatory to have a criminal record check for every citizenship by descent application? The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Well, I will look into that. I will carefully consider that amendment. But for there to be such an amendment in committee, we need to vote for the bill in principle so that it can be studied in committee. Thus, I suggest that my Conservatives colleagues join us in voting for the bill on principle to send it to committee, and then I'm sure we'll be able to find common ground on which we all agree.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague for his collaboration and cooperation at committee on S-245. I was delighted to work with him and was delighted he supported the NDP amendments as well, because that is the right thing to do, to restore the rights of Canadians, the rights that the Conservative took away. Now, I just want to ask the member, he might not have been elected at that time, neither was I, but to my understanding and to the knowledge of Don Chapman, who is really an extremely knowledgeable guy about the Lost Canadian file. When the Harper government brought in Bill C-37, he actually put forward an edict for all the parties that if they did not support it in its entirety, that they would actually take away the bill. And so that meant that the Conservative put in the poison pill in that bill with the first generation cutoff rule. And so would the member agree that that is the wrong thing to do on an issue as important as people's basic fundamental rights?
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was not an MP at that time, but the Bloc Québécois member for Vaudreuil-Dorion worked with Mr. Chapman and knows him well and worked with him on the file. It's a very important file. In the Bloc Québécois, we have a lot of expertise when it comes to Canadian citizenship because knowing about citizenship will help us when we eventually implement Québécois citizenship. I don't want to get into that. My colleague will understand that. For those who are tuning into debate, they can see that the Bloc Québécois members are the only adults in the room. Now, I'm not targeting anyone. I'm not pointing a finger at anyone, but everyone needs to contribute for us to work as a team. So I think that we should work together to send this to committee. There are already 3 parties which have stated that they will vote for this on principle. We will also be able to study conservative amendments in committee. The Bloc Québécois, as we've said, when we study a bill, we don't do so through an electoralist lens. We do so for the good of Quebecers. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for his speech and for his intelligent, open-minded, and constructive attitude. He mentioned the possibility of Quebec citizenship, but in the meantime, would he not agree that the entire process of immigration and citizenship, here we're debating C-71, which would fix some issues, but would he not agree that all immigration files should be thoroughly reviewed? That way we could all participate, study matters thoroughly and wisely. And as he said, this would be good practice for us for a future Quebec citizenship. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. C-71 is a very good step in the right direction to correct a flagrant injustice. C-71 is a good start. C-71 could also serve as a guidebook to us in Quebec for a future Quebec citizenship because it would really set out and establish clearly what it means to be a citizen of a country, what the definition is of that here. So this warrants consideration and teamwork. C-71, as we've said, is a step in the right direction. Many people want this matter resolved. It's been going on for way too long. The Bloc Québécois will work to correct this injustice.
The honourable member for Waterloo.
I very much appreciated the member's speech. Today's debate gives me the impression that we would consider conservative amendments in committee. The Bloc also has its opinions, which we would debate in committee. We can see that the Bloc Québécois will be supporting this bill. Here's my question to the member. In his view, is it important to vote for this bill so that we can debate it in committee, so that we can hear from expert witnesses, ask questions of expert witnesses? So would now be the time to put the question right now so that we can move forward on this file? Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, very quickly, Madam Speaker. Yes, I do, on the whole, agree with what the member has just suggested. Thank you. Questions and comments?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to emphasize that, achieving one's citizenship is a very significant fashion, as I have had opportunities, no doubt others have, to witness the swearing in of citizenships. And often we should not be taking it for granted. And one of the things that's quite upsetting, and I made reference to it in the question I asked to the Conservatives, is the idea that the Conservative Party feels very easy and relaxed in terms of using the notwithstanding clause. You have a superior decision made from the province of Ontario that says the first generation issue that the Harper government brought in is in fact unconstitutional. Can I get the Bloc's perspective in regards to having the Citizenship Act in compliance with the Constitution?
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, they're bringing up the notwithstanding clause, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this current legislature, the atmosphere is a bit odd because this question that I was just asked does not really relate to my speech. And in my speech, I said that in C-71, in studying it, we shouldn't be slinging mud at one another, that we should work together. There seems to be a general broad consensus for C-71. But then he asked me a question about my speech, but all he was trying to do was sling mud at the official opposition. Let's not start with that. It's only Monday. It's the beginning of the session. Could we please be responsible parliamentarians who represent the people of our ridings? Can we represent people responsibly without trying to set parliamentary traps and engage in politicking? Please, Madam Speaker?
Before I go to resuming debate, there seems to be a lot of conversations happening. I know members are piling in for question period, but I ask them to please do that very quietly to allow the debate to continue. The Honourable Member for Vancouver East, I will have to interrupt her in about 4 minutes. The Honourable Member.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm very happy to enter into this debate on Bill C-71 because the House is going to be getting ready for statements and question period. I will be interrupted with my speech. So I'm going to actually put a few things on the public record to the members' point from the Bloc that this is not about partisanship. But I think what is important, though, is that we actually put on the public record the history of what's happened with respect to lost Canadians. Members will know that 15 years ago, the Conservatives brought in Bill C-37, an act that was supposed to fix a lot of the lost Canadian issues. Now, in that, it did fix some of those issues. But in that process, the Conservative also put in a poison pill in the bill. And that is to say that on the first generation cutoff rule, deeming those whose second generation born abroad would not be able to confer their citizenship or receive their citizenship from their parents, that was incorporated in Bill C-37. At the time, I wasn't here, but those who watched that debate saw what happened, and the Harper government was clear to say, unless Bill C-37 passed in its entirety, or the bill would die, that they would actually get rid of it and kill it. That is information from Don Chapman, who is the king of experts on lost Canadian issues, because he's dedicated his life to addressing this injustice. And that is the knowledge that he brings to this floor by sharing with me about what happened. That is why the NDP and the Liberals had to vote for it, because we had no choice. Because if it didn't, what would it mean? Because it would mean this. Thousands upon thousands of Canadian World War II vets and tens of thousands of Canadian war brides and their children would have gone to their graves disenfranchised from their own country. A 20-year-old war bride in 1946 would today be 98 years old, and most of the Canadian brides and their World War II soldier husbands are now dead. If we hadn't accepted the first generation cutoff limit under C-37, all these folks would have died without citizenship, all because Harper would have killed Bill C-37. That is the reality, and that's why people were jammed to do that. Now, despite that, the critic for the NDP at the time, Olivia Chow, put on the public record and said this: we could get this bill done very quickly and accommodate this element by doing something very simple, just by amending subclause 2.2, or actually taking it out of the bill, because right now it limits citizenship to the first generation born to or adopted by Canadian parents. The NDP tried to raise the issue, and Olivia had said that we should get rid of the first generation born rule that the Conservatives brought in, but that was not allowed to take place because it was the poison pill that the Conservative put in place. Otherwise, they would have taken away all of those rights for war veterans and the war brides. That is the reason, and that's the history. Is this partisan politics? No, but it is an important part of the history to know what happened and where the Lost Canadian issue stemmed from, why we're here, and why the Superior Court had ruled that it is unconstitutional to take away those rights.
So now I do want to remind members, first of all, the honourable member will have 16 minutes the next time this matter is before the House. I want to remind members that we are going into statements. And I would just ask members to please have conversations on the outside as opposed to on the inside during this process. The Honourable Member Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to reflect on the end of an era for local television and radio in Kingston. CKWS turned global Kingston and their local radio stations have been more than just news outlets. They have been a trusted friend, a reliable source of information, and valued part of our daily lives. I want to say thank you to the dedicated professionals who have worked tirelessly to bring us the news, weather, and stories that matter the most. People like Bill Hutchins, Bill Welichka, Julie Brown, Bill Hall, Doug Jeffries, and so many more. These are the trusted voices that have made a lasting impact. To all the reporters, anchors, producers, and behind-the-scenes staff, your commitment to excellence and your passion for journalism have enriched our lives in countless ways. As the local news scene evolves, we will continue to rally to bring back the spirit of connection and information sharing that you fostered for decades. Thank you.
Again, there's quite a bit of a buzz, so I would ask members to please have conversations on the outside if they're not interested in listening to the statements. The Honourable Member for Battleford, Lloyd-Minster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, time's up. Hard work should always be rewarded, but life has never been so hard for Canadians. Workers can't afford to put gas in their tanks to get to work. Moms and dads are struggling to put food on the table, and a generation of Canadians has lost hope in the dream of home ownership. Fortunately, there is hope on the horizon. A common-sense Conservative government will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. We will turn the hurt that this Prime Minister has caused into hope, so that hard work is rewarded, food is affordable, neighbourhoods are safe, and every Canadian has a fair shot at a good life. Mr. Speaker, it's time for a carbon tax election.
The Honourable Member Nepean.
Madam Speaker, I am deeply concerned by violence targeting the religious minorities, including Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians in Bangladesh. Every time there's instability in Bangladesh, religious minorities, particularly Hindus, face the brunt. The share of religious minorities in the population of Bangladesh has significantly decreased since it achieved its independence in 1971. From 23.1%, including about 20% Hindus, it has now come down to just 9.6%, including about 8.5% Hindus. Canadian Hindus who have families in Bangladesh are concerned about the security and safety of their families, their temples, and properties. They will be holding a rally on Parliament Hill next Monday, September 23rd, to highlight the current situation there. They'll be joined by Canadian Buddhists and Christians who have families in Bangladesh. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rivière du Nord. Mr. Speaker, a big patriot has just left us. Marcel Tessier, who marked decades of Quebecers' lives, passed away recently. He sang the opera brilliantly, and we often heard him on TV, and the luckiest of us had him as a teacher. Anyone who knew him was suspended to his every word, hung to his every word. He was a grand historian, and he knew how to teach. He said that if Quebecers knew their own history better, Quebec would be an independent and free country for quite some time. He was a passionate storyteller. We will miss you, Marcel. Rest in peace. The Honourable Member for Orleans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I wish this House a strong start to the new parliamentary year, I would like to wish all the students in Orleans an excellent start to the new school year and a year filled with success. I'd like to thank all the teachers and staff in our schools for their guidance and support in their success. It's also a great pleasure to welcome over 600 students, residents from my community at my annual corn roast and barbecue. I'd like to underscore the top-rate collaboration of the Orleans Lions Club, which year after year ensures the smooth running of the cooking station. And it was also a privilege to welcome 21 young cadets from the Phoenix 632 Squadron of the Royal Air Force Cadets who came to lend us a hand at the event. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Dauphin Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up.
That's right.
But now the Prime Minister has doubled down on his carbon tax by appointing Mark Carney as his new de facto finance minister. As a jet-setting member of the global elite, Carbon Tax Carney has spent his entire career promoting a costly carbon tax. He supports the Prime Minister's plan to quadruple the carbon tax and oppose removing the carbon tax from home heating. Carbon Tax Carney has no issue lecturing working-class Canadians while he wines and dines with his global elite. He has so many conflicts of interest that the Prime Minister is shielding him from Canadian disclosure laws. Carney remains beholden to his corporate boards, meaning his interests of Canadians are an afterthought. Conservatives are demanding Mark Carney be sworn in as public office holder, so he follows Canada's conflict of interest laws. No Liberal is above the law.
Hear, hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honour the memory of Senator Joseph Day, who sadly passed away earlier this year. Joe Day was a distinguished lawyer and a remarkable and much-loved parliamentarian. Representing the province of New Brunswick for almost 2 decades, he held an exceptional 18-year tenure with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, culminating in his election as the Assembly's Vice President from 2016 to 2018. Joe held a deep love for the NATO Parliamentary Association and its mission. He worked tirelessly to advance and promote the mandate of the Defence and Security Committee. As the committee's General Rapporteur, Joe was a leading voice for NATO to strengthen its deterrence and defence position after Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. Today he's remembered not only for elevating Canada's position within the NATO alliance, but also for his achievements, as well as his kindness and sunny character. Joe, thank you for your leadership, your contributions to Canada, and your commitment to peace and security in the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am honoured to be back in the House after a productive summer in my riding of Mississauga, Erin Mills. Over the summer, I attended over 100 events, met with 180 organizations and businesses from my riding to discuss the issues most important to them. We welcomed thousands of residents to my 7th annual Mississauga Erin Mills barbecue. Our Women and Youth Council hosted a health symposium as well as a mental health panel to highlight important issues impacting the well-being of youth and women in our community. I met with hundreds of residents to talk about important issues such as housing and grocery prices. I hosted a roundtable discussion with Canadian Palestinians to listen and better understand their lived experiences with anti-Palestinian racism. Mr. Speaker, we have considerable work ahead of us on many important issues, and I'm looking forward to working with all members in this House to deliver for Canadians. Thank you.
The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, and time is up. Criminal gangs active in illegal lobster poaching have been terrorizing communities in Nova Scotia, and the incompetent Minister of Fisheries and Oceans has been nowhere to be found. This is dereliction of duty by the same minister that ignored the expert advice and reopened the northern cod fishery ahead of time. We are a nation of laws, founded under the principles of peace, order, and good government. But right now, Atlantic Canada's fishing communities don't have any of those blessings, and they feel completely abandoned by Ottawa. The president of the Unified Fisheries Conservation Alliance has described the situation as total lawlessness. The lobster fishers in Pugwash have reached out to me directly and told me just how concerned they are about the lack of enforcement. Unchecked illegal poaching must be stopped, and help is on the way. Common sense Conservatives will end lawlessness in the fishing industry and will restore order and safety to Atlantic Canada.
Excellent. The honourable member from Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today marks the 2nd year since the tragic murder of Mahsa Jina Amini. We commemorate her life, her story, and the names of countless others, amplifying the Iranian people's persistent call to end all form of persecution, violence against women and all civilians. Canada stands with the Iranian protesting for a better future where human rights are respected. The concern must be addressed and their right to protest must be protected. Mr. Speaker, the fight for human rights and freedom, as well as for justice and accountability, has not stopped. That is why Canada has led the international effort to respond to the Iranian regime's actions, including listing the IRGC as a terrorist entity and recently changing the designation day of the Iranian regime to June 23, 2003, ensuring its senior officials are inadmissible to Canada. We'll never forget the story of Mahsa Jina Amini and those who lost their life fighting for women in Iran and around the world. Zan, Zendegi, Azadi, women, life, freedom. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Montmagny-Lisle, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 9 years of this Liberal government has meant 9 years of inflationary spending. 9 long years during which the Liberals, with the support of the Bloc, have made Quebecers pay dearly. You could even say that there's no Bloc Québécois party in Parliament, only the Bloc Liberal coalition. It was this Bloc Liberal coalition that voted for the largest expansion of the federal government ever recorded. The Bloc Liberal coalition that voted to swell Ottawa's bureaucracy with 100,000 more public servants. The Bloc Liberal coalition that voted for $500 billion in budgetary appropriations to expand the most centralizing and costly federal government in history. That's why we don't have a Bloc Québécois party, just a Bloc Liberal coalition which uses Quebecers to waste and centralize their money here in Ottawa. The Bloc Liberal coalition is out of touch with Quebecers' daily lives. Besides, what's the Bloc for? Or rather, who does the Bloc serve? Quebecers or the Liberal Prime Minister? Fortunately, common sense Conservatives are hearing them loud and clear, and we're going to cut taxes, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop crime. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kildonan, St. Paul.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up, Mr. Speaker. The carbon tax has increased the cost of food, fuel, and home heating, and as a result, we're seeing record numbers of working Canadian families relying on food banks. And to make matters worse, the NDP Liberal government planned to quadruple the carbon tax, and they continue to vote for soft on crime policy. Since 2015, violent crime in Winnipeg is up 67%, car thefts up 63%, homicides up 100%, and gun crime up a whopping 177%, Mr. Speaker. This is the Liberal NDP record. Canadians struggling to afford food and crime and chaos in our streets. So today in Elmwood Transcona, the choice for Winnipeggers is simple. A vote for the NDP is a vote for the Liberals and their soft on crime carbon tax agenda. Only a common sense Conservative government will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier.
Rise today to honor Marlene Catterall, a trailblazing role model for Canadian women who served on Ottawa City Council and as Member of Parliament for 17 years. An accomplished parliamentarian, Marlene preferred to be known as a community activist. She fought for justice, lobbying for the release of constituent Maher Arar from Syrian prison. As Canada's first female chief government whip, she broke barriers in this chamber. Marlene
negotiated the unanimous vote to establish the Women Are Persons Monument on Parliament Hill and received the Governor-General's Persons Award, Canada's highest honour for women. Committed to the Francophonie, she has served on the board of directors of the CMFO and the Maison de la Francophonie of Ottawa. In recognition of her commitment, she received the Laurier Prize for ACFO Francophile of the Year.
Will be deeply missed by all who knew her. Thank you.
The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, New Democrats believe in taking care of each other. We believe that health care should be universally, accessibly, and publicly delivered. We believe that every Canadian should be able to afford a decent home and a fridge full of groceries. However, many Canadians are losing hope right now. New Democrats want to restore that hope and make life more affordable for everyone. But here's the truth. The Conservatives will steamroll the middle class if they are given the chance. When they were in power, they cut health care by more than $30 billion. Wait times ballooned and Canadians suffered. They cut pensions, forcing people to work longer and live on less in retirement. Conservatives have said that they will cut health care, dental care, pharmacare, child care, employment insurance. Even our Canadian pension plan is at risk, and all this to give a break to their corporate friends. NDP here in the House, we're here working for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, so we can hear my statement, I would like the sound in the House to be lowered, please. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to pay tribute to Benoit Roy, defender of Quebec and the French language, who was awarded the Chevalier de l'Ordre de la Pléiade of the Francophonie on 8th July. Benoit champions Quebec's sovereignty and the French language. Since 1974, he has dedicated himself to defending Quebec culture, and he founded a movement to protect French in Quebec. In a few months' time, we'll be celebrating the organization's 25th anniversary, and by then, Benoit will have been presented 63 awards. Rather, 117 awards over this period. And he organized a gala dinner to celebrate National Patriots' Day, paying tribute to those who worked for Quebec's political freedom and independence. His unwavering commitment has made him a key player in the promotion of Quebec's identity and of the French-speaking world. Congratulations, Benoit. Thank you for everything you do for my riding and for Quebec.
The honourable member from Battle Creek Crowfoot. Battle River Crowfoot, je m'excuse.
Thank you. Taxes up, costs up, crimes up, times up. Mr. Speaker, over the summer I spoke to thousands of Canadians where I heard heartbreaking stories of how they are hurting after 9 years of the NDP Liberals. It was 2 years ago that the sellout and cowardly leader of the NDP signed on to a costly coalition with that Liberal Prime Minister. But a couple of weeks ago, he tried to convince people that he had a spine, and with much bravado, he tore up the agreement. But following his media stunt, he refuses to state whether the NDP will vote to force a carbon tax election. The sellout NDP leader didn't get the bump in the polls he was hoping for, I guess, and went on to even suggest that after voting for the carbon tax 24 times, he has somehow found the light and now will oppose it, but with a caveat. Details to come after he qualifies for his pension. Canadians need a carbon tax election now to decide between a costly coalition of the NDP Liberals or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, recently Manitobans were shocked and saddened by the sudden passing of Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Cathy Merrick. Grand Chief Merrick was more than a leader. She was a beacon of strength, wisdom, and compassion. Her dedication to the AMC was not merely a role she undertook, but a calling she embraced with unwavering commitment. Her leadership was characterized by a deep understanding of the challenges faced by First Nations people and a relentless pursuit of justice and equality. Her impacts extend beyond her professional achievements. Grand Chief Cathy Merrick was a loving daughter, sister, wife, mother, aunt, cousin, grandmother, a supportive friend, and a trusted mentor to many. Her legacy will live on through the lives she touched and the progress she championed. As we reflect on her life, let us remember her resilience in the face of adversity, tireless work on behalf of First Nations people, and her unwavering commitment to building a better future. Mr. Speaker, her contributions have paved the way for many, and her spirit will continue to inspire us as we move forward on the journey towards truth and reconciliation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, I know you're looking forward to this. The honour to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of election and return of Mr. Stewart, member for the Electoral District of Toronto, St. Paul.
Roll.
Mr. Speaker, it is an honor to present to you Don Stewart, the member for the Electoral District of Toronto St. Paul's. He has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Let the honourable member take his seat.
For 9 years, the Liberal Bloc has put a tax on your food, causing your groceries to be more expensive, doubled the cost of housing, and doubled the national debt. With the full support of the Bloc has voted over 200 times to keep this party and this government in power. And now they want to increase your taxes even more. Isn't it time for you to have the chance to choose a new common sense government that will cut taxes, build housing, fix the budget, and stop crime? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, if the opposition leader had spent any time speaking to Canadians this summer, he would realize that Canadians want solutions. They want solutions to the challenges they face as families with fighting climate change. They want to know how Canada is going to position itself for the economy of the future. But the opposition leader is only interested in his own interests, not Canadians' interests. Meanwhile, we on the other side of the House here will continue to work to deliver the goods to Canadians to build a stronger economy for all. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, what Quebecers see is the biggest expansion of the federal government in Canadian history, a centralizing government and a costly one at that. And all this with the full support of the Bloc, which has voted some 200 times for inflationary spending, centralizing spending, and bureaucracy, which totals $500 billion. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers have the right to have a common-sense government that will cut taxes, build housing, fix the budget, and stop crime now. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. What we're doing, Mr. Speaker, when we announced in Quebec a significant investment in Telesat to create good jobs in Quebec, which will have an impact on productivity and national security in Canada and all around the world, the Conservative response was to call their friend Elon Musk to say, no, you can't send those jobs here to Canada. Instead, you should be giving your money to American billionaires. We find that completely far-fetched. We are here to invest in Quebecers for the future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crime's up, time's up. And now he wants a 300% carbon tax hike, all the way up to 61 cents a litre. Why not let Canadians choose a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The opposition has spent any time listening to Canadians over the summer, he would have heard that they need solutions. They need answers to the challenges they're facing. That's not what he's offering. Indeed, he doesn't care about Canadians. He just cares about himself and his own political interests. We're going to keep focused on doing the things that he refuses to do, whether it's him voting against dental care, whether it's him voting against child care, whether it's him voting against a national school food program. We're going to still deliver the things that matter to Canadians, like food in kids' bellies, childcare spaces, and supports for seniors to go to the dentist, many of them first time in years.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Children are hungrier than ever after 9 years of the NDP Liberals. In fact, 25% of them are not getting enough food, and we now know why. A carbon tax fraud has been perpetrated by this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, who kept secret Environment Canada documents that showed that the carbon tax was blowing a $25 billion hole in our economy. Our economy per capita is smaller today than it was 10 years ago, during which time the American economy has grown by 19%. Instead of a reckless plan to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre, why not allow Canadians to vote to axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Here's a news flash for the Conservative leader. Climate change costs money, and what would cost the most money to Canadians at all is his do-nothing climate plan. News flash. When the Toronto subway gets flooded, it costs money. News flash. When forest fires hit communities across this country, it costs Canadians money to rebuild. When you have droughts that hit farmers and agriculturists across this country, it costs money. What doesn't cost money is putting money in 8 out of 10 of the money of Canadians' pockets with the Canada Carbon Rebate to support their families and fight climate change.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister just proved my point. His tax doesn't stop floods, fires, or droughts. All it does is create more poverty. This also from a high-flying, high-taxing, high-carbon hypocrite who flew 92,000 kilometers in a fuel-guzzling, tax-funded private jet while he taxes single moms and seniors for heating their homes. Now, carbon tax Carney wants him to put the tax back on home heating oil. Will he reject carbon tax Carney and instead allow Canadians to choose to axe the tax?
Just want to remind all members, and to do so early, to be very mindful of their language that they use in referring to other members in this House. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader doesn't believe in climate change, and that's why he has a do-nothing plan to fight climate change. It would cost Canadians money and challenge the future we're building for our kids. Our plan, with the Canada Carbon Rebate, puts more dollars in 8 out of 10 Canadians' pockets right across the country, supports the middle class and people working hard to join it, while delivering the kinds of investments that are going to grow our economy and reduce emissions at the same time. This is a responsible climate plan that fights climate change and supports Canadians. He wants to do nothing. He wants to hurt Canadians.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, allow me first of all to wish a warm welcome to everyone. Welcome back here to all of us. It's a by-election in...
We're just going to take the chance now, guys, to say hello to everybody. It's great for us to get together like this, to people that are new, for the people that are new to the channel. This is what it's like all the time. We watch these question periods with a bunch of really cool people that get it, and it's so fun. So anyways, come check us out, like, subscribe, share, get notified, all those fun things, and let's give you back some audio.
He did recognize that seniors 75 and over have higher costs and often lower savings. So we've increased investments for them. But what I don't really understand, Mr. Speaker, is that the Bloc, which claims to be concerned about people of that age group, those 65 and over, why did they vote against dental care for those tens of thousands of seniors all across Canada who've recently been able to get dental care paid by the federal government, and the Bloc voted against it? They don't care about seniors in the Bloc. Once again, I'd like members to stick to language that's much more clearly parliamentary. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, it's easy to get the Prime Minister confused. I'm talking about a jurisdiction that is exclusive to Quebec, that the federal government has encroached upon. He also said that Anglophones in Quebec couldn't get health care services in English the same as Francophones. That's false. So I would ask him explicitly to recognize that he misled Montreal, Quebec, and La Salle et Marverdun's Anglophones when he said that Anglophones don't get the same health care services as Francophones. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. He claims to speak for the government of Quebec, but the government of Quebec itself admitted that they were going to issue an order to clarify and explain that they were not going after Anglophones. We're still waiting for that explanation, but if the government of Quebec can recognize that, then I think the Bloc should be able to acknowledge it too. So for seniors over 65 who got dental care thanks to us, they don't care about them. They just want their jurisdiction, but we're providing something that Quebec was not providing, and so the federal government stepped up and paid for that so that those seniors could get dental care that their own government, provincial government, wasn't providing them, and the Bloc voted against that. The Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby. The housing crisis in La Salle et Marverdun, like everywhere else in Quebec, continues to worsen under the Liberals. Hundreds of people are now homeless. This is the direct result of the Liberals and Conservatives making rules so rich investors get richer while tenants pay more. Together, the Liberals and Conservatives have lost over 1 million affordable housing units. People deserve better. When will the Prime Minister stop working for real estate giants and start protecting tenants at last? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. What's been done in recent years is I've had a lot of good conversations with the NDP leader and colleagues in the NDP, and I know that they're truly concerned about Canadians' situations and they want to help. But what's obvious is that they have no idea how to go about it. And as soon as the Conservatives attack them a little bit, they hide and run. Yes, it's difficult to deliver progressive things in this country, but we as a government are doing just that. And with or without the NDP, we will continue to deliver for people all across the country. We will provide housing, services, and more.
The honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
No excuses. No one in Canada should be homeless, period. Full stop. And no one in Canada should pay out of pocket to get the health care they need. The Liberals are letting people be charged membership fees or bundled payments to gain access to primary care covered by universal health care. And Conservatives want people to pay for health care in Elmwood, Transcona, and right across this country. Liberals let you down on health care, you pay. Conservative cut health care, you pay. When will Liberals start making people pay for health care that should be free?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as everyone in here knows, over the past couple of years I've had lots of great conversations with the NDP, and I know they actually do care about Canadians and about delivering for them. Unfortunately, they have no idea how to do it, and as soon as hard things got hard, they turned tail and ran, Mr. Speaker. Wanted to avoid the criticisms of the mean old Conservatives and tried to save themselves. Well, the reality, Mr. Speaker, is we know that hard things are hard. We're going to continue to deliver progressive solutions for Canadians because we're going to step up and fight for Canadians and not hide from the Conservatives.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
The Prime Minister gave the Finance Minister a real vote of confidence last week as he outsourced the job that she was supposed to have been doing for 4 years and gave it to a man who's not even in the Liberal caucus. First, the Prime Minister tried to fire her in the newspaper, and now she's being shoved aside for Carbon Tax Carney, a man focused on his own profits and his own corporate interests, who was brought in to serve as the de facto Finance Minister. She's lost her job responsibilities. She's lost her credibility. How long will the Phantom Finance Minister endure this humiliation?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am not going anywhere. Focus on personal mudslinging and attacks rather than to actually talk about the economy. They don't want to talk about inflation because it's been down in the target range for 7 months in a row. They don't want to talk about interest rates down 3 times in a row. All they can do is insult people.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Who's going to tell her? She just got a demotion and he hired a guy that's not even elected to do her job. Does anyone believe that Carbon Tax Carney is going to tell the Prime Minister how to help a family afford groceries as the loudest cheerleader for carbon taxes ever? If the Finance Minister isn't completely humiliated by now, can she explain why Canadians should trust a man who is the #1 supporter of higher taxes to do her job?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we are seeing more clearly than ever that the only thing the Conservatives know how to do is to level personal attacks and personal denigration. They do not care about Canadians, and now they're scared about the facts of our economy. So let me tell you some facts. Inflation in the target range for 7 months in a row. Interest rates down 3 times in a row. And the IMF says we'll have the strongest economic growth in the G7.
The honourable member from Calgary, Nose Hill.
This summer, after he argued that Atlantic Canadian home heating oil should be carbon taxed, carbon tax-loving Mark Carney spent a lovely summer of whimsy having champers at the Royal Box at Wimbledon and rubbing shoulders at a swish cocktail party with a wealthy CEO who yesterday, coincidentally, got millions of dollars of tax dollars. This is not someone who's in touch with the struggle of average Canadians, but neither is the Prime Minister. Did he push aside his now phantom female cabinet minister because carbon tax-loving Mark Carney could get him into fancier parties than she can?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Mr. Speaker, look, I first
just want to begin by saying it's great to be back in this place. I really did miss most people on this side. I can't say that I missed all of you that much, but I did miss you a little bit. But what I do want to say is that it's just typical from the Conservatives that when they have an eminent Canadian, someone who has given so much to this country, who doesn't agree with their economic vision or their vision at all in Canada, they attack them. Mr. Speaker, we need to be better than this. We need to support Canadians and be grateful when they put forward for public service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Calgary, Nose Hill.
They're not even letting her answer the question anymore. At a time when so many people are struggling to make ends meet and pleading for someone to fix the budget, I'm struggling to find a reason why the Prime Minister would put an out-of-touch elitist, active archpriest of carbon price profiteering who has massive conflicts of interest in charge of the federal budget while shunting aside his female cabinet minister. What a feminist. Why does the now Phantom Finance Minister have to get approval for Canada's fall economic statement from carbon tax, conflict of interest, Mark Carney?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm actually really glad to welcome back to the QP roster the member for Calgary Nose Hill. We haven't heard her raising her voice for a while. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going anywhere, but I am not surprised to see the Conservatives continue cartoonish personal attacks. And that is because they're afraid to reveal to Canadians their plan for austerity and cuts, because they know that's not what Canadians want.
The honourable member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, we have two sources saying the view of some senior officials within the PMO, including Chief of Staff Katie Telford, that the Phantom Finance Minister has been ineffective in selling the government's economic policies. So, it's curious because we have a fake feminist Prime Minister who says he's all for women. Taxes are up, costs are up, the economy's in the toilet, and this carbon tax, Mark Carney, is now going to quadruple the carbon tax on all home heating across Canada. So why is this Phantom Finance Minister okay with being publicly humiliated by this fake feminist Prime Minister?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the only people being humiliated today are Conservative MPs who have to listen to their colleagues wallow in the mud of personal character assassination. But what we are focused on is representing and working for Canadians. That's why, Mr. Speaker, the real news today is 30-year mortgage amortizations for all first-time home buyers. That's the real news, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, it is not Conservatives saying that. It's the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, for the record. And so I guess the question is before this Phantom Finance Minister. She simply has two choices. Is she going to join the graveyard of Liberal female ministers under this fake feminist Prime Minister? Or, like Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott? Or will she continue to be publicly humiliated?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, what we are seeing today is the Conservatives running away from the reality about the Canadian economy. They are running away from the fact that inflation is in the Bank of Canada's target range for 7 months in a row. They are running away from interest rates down 3 times in a row, the first time in the G7, and wages outpacing inflation for 18 months. The only thing the Conservatives know how to do is traffic in cheap insults. Canadians are a lot better than that.
L'honorable député de Shefford.
The honourable member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of talk these days about elections. Some are doing their calculations, but for the Bloc, it's simple. Our confidence is in Quebecers, not the Liberals, not the Conservatives, Quebecers. And Quebecers are telling us they're concerned about the cost of living and seniors' standard of living. That's why our priority is to increase old age security for people aged 65 to 74. They're being unfairly discriminated against, and it's got to stop. It's as simple as that. Will the government listen to this simple request from Quebecers? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the next time the Bloc supports seniors will be the first time in the history of this Parliament. Let's look at the facts. When we restored the retirement age to 65, what did the Bloc do? They voted against. When we increased the GIS, helping millions, thousands of seniors in Quebec, the Bloc voted against that too. And when we provided dental care to seniors, the Bloc voted against that too. They're doing nothing for seniors. The Honourable Member for Shefford. The Bloc's request is simple. Our bill, C-319, would increase the OAS for 65 to 74-year-olds by 10%. It's so simple and so sensible that in committee, all parties supported our bill. All that's missing is the government's support. So since all parties agreed to increase OAS for 65 to 75-year-olds by 10%, will the government do the only right thing and give C-319 a royal recommendation? The Honourable Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome the Bloc with their support for seniors, because this is exactly what this government is all about. Look at what we've done, whether it was the grocery rebate, whether it was increasing the GIS, whether it was the many things we've done, including dental care this year, which is being delivered all across Quebec, including my colleague opposite's riding, which she voted against. Mr. Speaker, we are there for seniors. The Honourable Member for Shefford. I toured all over Quebec this summer to talk about C-319. Everyone gets that it's unfair for seniors under 75 to get 10% less than the rest. Everyone gets that, unlike the Liberals, a grocery bill doesn't discriminate based on age. That's why this is the Bloc's top priority. Quebecers understand the problem. They understand our approach. Will the Liberals finally get it too and give C-319 a royal recommendation? The Honourable Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, what the Bloc doesn't seem to get is that actions count and votes here in the House count. Voting against dental care for seniors, voting against bringing the retirement age back down to 65, that's what Quebecers have seen from the Bloc. The Government of Canada will always be there to take care of Quebecers, and the Bloc has never shown themselves to be there to protect Canadians' pensions, whether it's in Quebec or elsewhere. This is our first day back, but I'd like everyone to remain polite. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc voted for the largest expansion of the federal government ever. More spending than ever. More public servants than ever. More scandals than ever. With Quebecers' money. How did the Prime Minister convince the Bloc to support the most expensive and centralizing government in Canadian history? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, our government is proudly progressive. Our government is proud of our action on the climate. We're proud of our support for child care And our government is very proud of our support for families. And Mr. Speaker, we know that those progressive values are the same values that Quebecers hold dear. And that is why we are supporting Quebec. We're supporting them when it comes to the climate, to childcare, and we're proud to be doing it here too. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. The Bloc claims to defend Quebecers' interests. Is it in Quebecers' interest to support the most expensive government in Canadian history? Is it in Quebecers' interest to raise their taxes, to strengthen the federal government, which is constantly encroaching on Quebec's jurisdiction? It's clear. The Bloc is only defending the Prime Minister's interests. What did the Prime Minister offer the Bloc leader to get him to agree to support this centralizing government? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, look at the Conservatives. They have no shame in claiming that they want to march towards prosperity when all they can do is take the path of austerity. Canadians know that all the Conservatives can do is chop, 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 Mr. Speaker. They cut investments for ports, for small craft. They made cuts to science, to families, to child care services. They cut for dental care. And that is the path the Conservatives will take, the path to austerity. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, one coalition appears to have ended, but another remains, the Bloc Liberal coalition, responsible for $500 billion in inflationary centralizing spending. Under this coalition, the public service grew by more than 100,000 public servants. That's the most expensive government in Canadian history. But wait times and service standards have never been worse. My constituents and staff in Beauce have to wait hours to get answers. What did the Prime Minister promise the Bloc leader to keep him in power, the most expensive and centralizing government in Canadian history? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This summer I had the opportunity to speak to many of my colleagues in the Liberal caucus who met in my riding, and we talked about the cuts the Conservatives made when they were in power. So I took them to the experimental farm because they don't believe in science, so they made cuts to agricultural research. I took them to show a cultural centre that we built because all they did was make cuts to culture. Quebecers remember that when the Conservatives were in office, all they could do is make cuts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, because of Liberal inaction, people in Nanaimo Ladysmith are forced to cut back on groceries to keep up with rising prices. Meanwhile, the Conservatives continue to pad their pockets with donations from the same CEOs who are gouging Canadians. Over the summer, people shared with me that they are exhausted and just aren't able to make ends meet. Why are the Liberals taking a page out of the Conservative playbook by putting corporate greed ahead of everyday people?
Shame Paul, shame
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, excuse me.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. It's a shame that the NDP's recent hard right turn has taken them down the wrong path. It's too bad that they've caved to the Conservative pressure. We worked collaboratively for many months to introduce numerous rounds of changes to Canada's competition laws, which I think are significant signs of progress that will amount to better prices, more options for Canadians. That includes more powers to the Competition Bureau to crack down on anti-competitive behavior. Those changes are going to make a real difference in Canada's economy.
The Honourable Member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, the poorest seniors are receiving hundreds of dollars less every year because Liberal policies created another GIS clawback. This summer, I heard from seniors and their loved ones. They are drowning. Conservatives cut pensions and increase the retirement age. And Liberals are punishing the poorest seniors. Canadians never win with Liberals or Conservatives. When will the clawbacks end?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
As the member well knows,
not only does the GIS or CPP or the OAS go up, but it goes up now quarterly, Mr. Speaker. In fact, there are no clawbacks when the member knows full well that we've expanded actually the amount of money a senior on GIS might make before any money is clawed back. We've expanded that substantially. The member should know that.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, members on this side of the House have spent their summers listening to Canadians. We heard about grandparents and children getting access to the Canadian Dental Care Plan. And we heard about the need for a government that's focused on building more homes, faster, growing our economy, and making life cost less. What we've seen from Conservatives do all summer is bet against our economy and bet against Canadians for their own political gain. Can the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, share with us the good economic news we saw over the summer and what this means for Canadians and for their families?
He looks like Nemo from Finding Nemo.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague for his excellent question and for his very hard work. COVID and its economic aftermath have been hard for Canadians, and that's why it's important to recognize the good news we've had this summer. Canada was the first G7 country to lower interest rates, easing the burden on homeowners. And inflation has now been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 7 months. Wages have outpaced inflation for 18 months in a row. We have more work to do, and that's why we're focused on Canada and Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, I've been to Sacré-Cœur several times to meet the Boisacco Forestry Company. The employees are feeling very worried, and rightly so, because they're in danger of losing their jobs. The Environment Minister's order is a nightmare for the forestry sector. It's going to kill jobs, shut down businesses. It could even wipe out communities. The sector represents 1,200 jobs in Quebec and nearly 900 million in economic benefits. Will the minister stop and think about the human beings behind his radical policies, and will he guarantee that he will not impose his order? The Honourable Environment Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to be here with you today at the beginning of the session. I'd like to remind my Conservative colleague that the Government of Quebec committed in 2016, and now it's 2024, almost 2025, but the Government of Quebec committed 8 years ago to present a plan to protect the woodland caribou. They haven't done so. Recently, they signed an agreement with us, the federal government, saying that their plan would be ready in June 2023 to protect 65% of the woodland caribou habitat. They promised to do so, so they should do so if they don't want a federal order. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm curious. I'm wondering, can the minister even point to Sacré-Cœur on a map? Inflation, cost of living, interest rates, life is hard enough as it is. Now the Liberals, they just have to add another layer of stress. The Bloc Québécois supports them, and the only way to get rid of this tired old government is to replace it with a Conservative government. The Bloc voted with the Liberals 188 times to keep the Liberals in power. Will the Bloc Liberal coalition leave forestry workers alone once and for all? The Honourable Environment and Climate Change Minister. Mr. Speaker, if only you knew how many times this summer I met with Quebecers. They find this ridiculous. It's ridiculous to talk about a Bloc Liberal coalition. Now, we work well with the Bloc Québécois, but there is no coalition. Quebecers find that really far out. The Conservatives do not care at all about protecting the environment. That's apparent. They don't care about water quality, the quality of our environment, about the future we're leaving our children. We, though, are here for people, for communities, and for the environment, Mr. Speaker.
Calgary, Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. When the Prime Minister promised to quadruple the carbon tax scam, the leader of the NDP said, yes, sir, anything for his $2.2 million pension. And now, the Canadian Truckers Alliance released a damning report. The carbon tax scam adds more than $4 billion costs to farmers, families, and food. Why don't they just call a carbon tax election now and let Canadians decide whether to quadruple or axe the tax for good?
The Honourable Minister for Environment and Climate Change.
Newsflash, Mr. Speaker. We had a carbon tax election in 2021, and the Conservative Party had a platform where they said they would put in place carbon pricing in this country. Maybe he just has to go and look back at their own platform, Mr. Speaker. Again this morning, the Parliamentary Budget Officer was in committee saying that 8 out of 10 Canadian families where carbon pricing applies get more money than what they pay in pricing, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party of Canada continues to spew lies and disinformation on this issue.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
The PBO proved that orange jumpsuit, handcuff-wearing minister is lying when he said that more Canadians pay into this.
Fergus is going to say something about this. Look at him up there. Oh, playing with his button. Fergus does like to play with his button. Oh my God, what a delay. What do you think he's going to do? What do you think he's going to say?
I know it's the first day back for members. We've all spent this time with our ridings. I'm going to ask the Honourable Member if he could rephrase his question because he knows that you can't. I'm going to ask him to.
Pictures that you've seen of this guy in the orange jumpsuits.
I am going to ask the Honourable Member to rephrase his question, to not use language which is normally considered unparliamentary. The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn, from the top.
What this orange jumpsuit wearing, handcuff loving minister doesn't understand is that the PBO proved Canadians pay more into this scam than what they get back. And it's done nothing to stop a single forest fire or flood. It's a scam and nothing else. And the leader of the NDP continues to prop this carbon tax scam up so he can get his $2.2 million pension. That's why he voted in favor of it 24 times. Call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can axe the tax and kick this carbon tax costly coalition to the curb.
It's really important for all members to choose their language and use their words judiciously in a way that is respectful to the House. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, that kind of language from the member opposite is totally inappropriate. And quite frankly, Canadians deserve better. But it's what we've come to expect from the Conservative leader and his caucus, who would prefer.
Fergus has something to say.
Colleagues, I could not hear the Honourable Minister give her response. It's difficult for me to hear that, so that I can make sure that the language is correct. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House, please, from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the language from the member opposite was completely inappropriate, and quite frankly, Canadians deserve better. But unfortunately, that's what we've come to expect from the Conservative members and their leader. And the reason why they're focusing on the price on pollution is because they want to distract Canadians from the real agenda, where they cut pensions for seniors, they cut childcare for families, they cut and defund the CBC at a time of increased disinformation. Mr. Speaker, they want to hide their real agenda from Canadians because they know that they won't like it. But, Mr. Speaker, they need to be under that scrutiny and they need to be honest with Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's tested on the first day back.
Again, I'm going to ask members on all sides to please make sure that they only address the House when they have recognized by the Speaker to hold the floor.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm.
On October 30th, Quebec will move forward for patients and their families. Quebec will implement its own legislation to govern advance requests for medical assistance in dying. 6 professional orders are calling on the federal government to align the criminal code with Quebec's legislation. Allow me to quote the Collège des médecins. We deplore the fact that the federal government has not agreed to amend the criminal code to authorize this approach, which is well regulated and on which a broad consensus exists in Quebec. Will the Justice Minister finally listen to patients, doctors, and science and amend the criminal code? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very sensitive topic. We need to take the right amount of time. We need to study the legal implications of this matter. We also need the time to have a national, countrywide conversation. I need to discuss this with all of my provincial and territorial counterparts. We all need to discuss this and reflect because there will be many consequences, but I look forward to continuing to discuss and work with the colleague across the way. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Yes, but since February 2023, the Minister has been repeating that he's consulting the provinces, that he's thinking things over, that advance requests are complicated. While he was dithering, though, Quebecers are for it. 97% of Quebecers support this, and Quebec has passed its own legislation. Patients want it implemented, and doctors want to be able to practice with complete peace of mind. Does the Minister understand that there's a difference between carefully studying an issue and dragging his feet while people suffer? The Honourable Justice Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the utmost respect for the important, critical work that Quebec has accomplished when it comes to advance requests. Canada has one and only one criminal code for good reason. Canadians deserve clarity and clear standards regarding what is criminal and what is not. So we are not yet ready to implement an exception for Quebec on this matter, but we will continue to be transparent and we will continue to work in collaboration with Quebec in determining the next steps. Thank you.
Member from Toronto, St. Paul's.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time's up. Just last week, we heard 1 million people in Ontario were accessing food banks. Meanwhile, the NDP leader supports the Prime Minister, keeps him in power, and supports his crushing carbon tax increases. I just finished a successful by-election campaign. Why will the NDP Liberals not let Canadians decide about the carbon tax and call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome my new colleague to this place. It's important, of course, to always be open and transparent with Canadians, and what we see is someone else who knows how to repeat 3-word slogans as opposed to be able to
They think it's a big joke.
Mr. Speaker, what the members opposite are doing are trying to evade what they actually plan to deliver for Canadians. So I hope that the member opposite can be more honest and transparent with Canadians moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You know who last got rid of
The Honourable Member from Brantford, Brent.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Canadians are feeling more unsafe than ever. Violent crime up 50%, sex assaults up 75%, car theft 46%, and shockingly violent gun crime over 100%. Will the Liberals finally join Conservatives in protecting Canadians and demanding jail, not bail, for repeat violent offenders?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, my fundamental job is to keep Canadians safe. Here's what we've been doing in the last 12 months. We've increased...
Colleagues, I would appreciate being able to hear the honourable member's response. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada, from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, my fundamental job is to keep Canadians safe. Here's what I've been doing the last 12 months. I proposed new offences for money laundering. The Conservatives voted against. I've increased the penalties for violent carjackings. The Conservatives voted against. I and my colleague, the Minister of Public Safety, have put $160 million to aid the CBSA and law enforcement in detecting and stopping car thefts. Car thefts are down 17% over the last 6 months compared to last year. There's still more work to do. We're going to continue to do that work. While the Conservatives shout slogans, we are going to keep Canadians safe.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Simple fact is criminals have nothing to fear under the NDP Liberal legislation. Bill C-48 has done nothing to stop the crime in our communities. Instead of listening to premiers and law enforcement who have called for bail reform, the Justice Minister pretends that C-48 is a success. Mr. Speaker, it's an abject failure. When will the minister stop protecting criminals, start standing up for victims by reversing their catch and release policies?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I spent the summer listening to victims, and what they talk to me about is intelligent policies and approaches to crime. What we did is pass in this chamber, thankfully with the unanimous support, bail reform. The job is now on the provinces to ensure that that bail reform bears fruit. What am I talking about, Mr. Speaker? The people that decide bail decisions are justices of the peace and primarily provincial court judges appointed at the provincial level. The people that appeal bail decisions, such as my colleague in his former capacity, are provincial crown attorneys who are under the direction of provincial premiers and provincial attorneys general. When there's not enough jail space to keep people in jail who don't deserve bail, that's a provincial responsibility.
The honourable member from Halifax West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On this day, 50 years ago, 32 women across Canada took the oath to become RCMP's first female officers. Wow. They became known as Troop 17. Today, we celebrate them and all women who have taken the oath since, who selflessly serve in the RCMP to keep Canadians safe. Can the Minister of Public Safety update this House on the efforts made to encourage more women to follow in their footsteps and join the RCMP?
Amazing.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, 50 years ago, 32 brave women took the oath to become the first female RCMP officers. Despite facing challenges and discrimination throughout their careers, the women of Troop 17 persevered and have inspired thousands of women to proudly serve in the RCMP. Today, more than 1/5 of the RCMP regular members are women, and the RCMP continues its effort to recruit even more women to join the force. I know all colleagues will join me in celebrating the women of Troop 17 and all those who proudly serve in the RCMP today. Well done.
The honourable member from Coast of Bay Central, Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. And now foreign access to Northern Cod is up. With the backing of the 6 Liberal Newfoundland and Labrador MPs, this government broke the promise to allocate the first 115,000 tonnes of Northern Cod to the inshore harvesters, and they caved to NAFO pressure to allow foreign countries back in with 5% of the Northern Cod quota. So this minister, Mr. Speaker, does she work for foreign nations or does she work for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is aware of the cultural, economic, and historic importance of cod for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's why, after 30 years of closure, announced new modern fishing, which will lead to significant windfall for Newfoundland and Labrador, all while leading to well-paying jobs. Our government is committed towards sustainable, prosperous fishing that will support the generations of today and tomorrow, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, and time's up for this atrocious Liberal fisheries minister. She has failed to protect one of Atlantic Canada's most important industry, the lobster fishery. In my riding, there are no DFO enforcement officers along the Canada-U.S. border. Poachers from Maine are illegally fishing lobsters in our waters. They are stealing Canada's natural resources. 60 New Brunswick fishing boats held a peaceful protest Saturday, calling on the minister to enforce the law and protect Canadian sovereignty. Will she do her job, or will the Prime Minister fire her?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our DFO officers do a very difficult job. They do it every day. But the opposition keeps saying that there's no enforcement on our waters. Well, that is completely false. And moreover, Mr. Speaker, it's irresponsible. This work is ongoing.
The honourable member from New Brunswick Southwest had the opportunity to ask his question. I'm going to ask him to please hold his comments and let the minister respond to his question. And I'm certain he has an opportunity to ask questions again on the same issue. Then I have
the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, and with 12 seconds remaining. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If he can shout, I can shout. We are deploying the necessary additional resources in order to protect our oceans and our resources, Mr. Speaker.
Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Here we go, Rick. After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes, costs, and crime are up, and fisheries officers are refusing to patrol the Maritimes because these Liberals will not let them enforce the law. Poachers are attacking with shotguns and knives. Meanwhile, Liberal Fisheries Minister number 6 lives in denial, refusing to listen to the union. 20,000 pounds of lobster a day are poached through the Saulnieville Wharf alone. Americans are fishing in Canadian waters. Will the Prime Minister listen to fishermen for a change, call an election so Conservatives can fix the fishery?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I encourage my colleagues to listen to the English interpretation of what I'm about to say in French, Mr. Speaker. What's being suggested is totally false. DFO enforcement agents are doing their job, Mr. Speaker. And on this side of the House, we're not putting on a show. We're working because this is an important matter. This pertains to safety, the safety of our waters and on our waters, and what he's suggesting is totally irresponsible. We will continue to do the necessary work in the right way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Again, I'll ask members who ask questions to please ask their question and then listen to the response and then take up the question again when their turn has been offered. The honourable member from Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This summer, I was pleased to join the Minister of Health to sign 2 new healthcare agreements with British Columbia. These agreements will enhance wages for personal support workers and improve accessibility and affordability to medication across BC. Canadians believe in our healthcare system, and we must continue to build up a healthcare system for all generations. Could the Minister of Health please share with us how these agreements will support healthcare in BC?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Richmond Centre for his advocacy in health and to make sure that we have the greatest health system in the world. And you know, we're seeing that unfold in British Columbia with an agreement that's going to make sure that healthcare assistants, what some call personal support workers, are getting a fair wage, making sure that we work in partnership, that the people who keep our hospitals and our long-term care facilities and assisted care facilities going, as well as an essential agreement on pharmacare, making sure that every person in British Columbia has access to the contraceptives they need, has access to the diabetes medication they need, and yes, to menopause hormone treatment, Mr. Speaker. These are huge things for our health system.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' failure to fund services through Jordan's Principle is endangering First Nations youth. In fact, in Winnipeg, Spirit Horse Action Therapy is owed almost $400,000. And the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society says this government's neglect is putting kids at risk. When will the Liberals respect their legal obligations to Jordan's Principle and ensure the health and safety of First Nations youth?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for...
Mr. Speaker, I'm so proud to be part of a government that puts Indigenous children first. First Nations children are getting the services they need after a decade of neglect with the previous Conservative government ignoring their needs, leading to historic lawsuits and, of course, the compensation required to make up for such a terrible omission. And we are making it right, Mr. Speaker. We're ensuring that no First Nations child goes without the care they deserve.
It's question period. The honourable member from Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you. I have a question for the Environment Minister. Northvolt is setting up on the contaminated lands of a previous place. There are jurisdictional impacts. Thousands of people signed a petition for a federal assessment. The mayors of Saint-Basile and McMasterville are wondering what the repercussions of this Northvolt plant will be. Will the minister use his powers to order an environmental impact assessment to study the impact of the Northvolt plant in Quebec? The Honourable Environment and Climate Change Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for Saanich Gulf Islands for her question. The Canada Impact Assessment Agency received a request for an impact assessment, so the impact assessment study is underway. The agency will make its recommendations in the upcoming weeks. The leader of the Green Party and I and many others in Canada are confused, though, about the NDP's position on carbon pricing. I did some door-to-door in La Salle et Marverdun over the weekend, and so many people told me that they don't understand the NDP's new stance because it would be harmful to the whole country.
To point of order, I wish to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the Honourable P.J. Akiagok, Premier of Nunavut.
Here we go, guys. Back in session.
I see the...
And it looks like that show is just about over.
Member from...
No, it's over. So, what we're going to do here, guys, is show a couple of videos that I've made that are the introductions to the lives. I do other videos. I do shorts. I do regular length videos that are all about Canadian federal politics. I try not to speak too much of my mind because free speech isn't really a thing these days. You're allowed to show the content, you just can't comment on it. And so I'm trying to find that balance. But I made a couple of these videos. We've been doing this now, pulling in on a year. And I'm so excited to see so many people back. What a fun time. What a great crew of people. You come in this place and you start into this room and you start calling the Conservatives liars. You're probably not going to be too well received. But I don't care. We've got ways to defend against other people's harmless opinions. Anyhow, so this is it. This is my intro and extra from... where is it now? Here we go.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Squiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises. WTF.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The worst that works. You know I am. I am Canadian. Come on! I love this country where I am. This land is where I make my stand. The mother earth gets truer than
the one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
You should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper bumper, stomper boo, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Bing bong knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong tick tock, bebop boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Ding dong knock knock, hey daddy do. Tip tap, pitter pat, granny cat too. Rooty toot, Kimble, loopy loo. Bobbity stompity, romper room. Romper room and friends.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
WTF. Here, here.